যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Hi guys, thank you for joining the live stream. I hope the audio is coming fine. Yeah, it is. So, guys, is it at all possible that people are professors, these sociology professors are looking at our live streams? Because um, when we discussed Surinder Jodhka's, I think we discussed one paper, and no, we discussed one interview that he was a guest in, and one podcast in Kunal Kamra's podcast. So both the times while discussing his research, because we have so many agreements with him, the views that we hold on caste from this channel. So I kept mentioning that, wow, see, he is saying this, Andre Beti is saying this, Dr. Dipankar Gupta is saying this, kind of Declan Quigley, Nicholas B. Dirks, Irfan Habib. So incidentally, just 3 days back, Dr. Surinder Jodhka himself sat down with Dr. Dipankar Gupta. He was kind of interviewing Dr. Dipankar Gupta, okay? And Dipankar Gupta's book, Interrogating Caste, we have talked about many times from this channel, that how he points out that there weren't any solidified, rigidified hierarchies that were the exactly same in the entire country, how this hierarchy doesn't make sense there, etc. So since they have talked to each other now, just 3 days back, we are going to very happily check that out. And also for the first about 15 minutes, they discuss their careers, the beginnings of their careers a little, which we will check out anyway, just as a curious sneak peek into the world of sociologists and scholars. This channel is basically paparazzi and TMZ for social science, right? So just yesterday and today, I was having a conversation with Professor Babones on WhatsApp, asking him excitedly things that I'm going to ask him when he comes on the podcast as well, when his books Indian Nation releases in India. So very fascinating research, insane amounts of research has gone on to writing that book, practically 4 to 5 years of research. And so I was asking those fanboy kind of questions that people ask celebrities. So that's what we are going to do today in this live stream as well. We are going to check out, we are going to gossip about the discussion that Dr. Dipankar Gupta and Dr. Surinder Jodhka had. First, I asked ChatGPT to make a summary of this video. I have not gone through the video as of now. I've only checked out up till the portions where they discuss the beginnings of their academic careers, at least Dipankar Gupta's career. So these bullet points are made by ChatGPT. For anyone who would not want to check out the rest of the video, let's see what are the bullet points, the gist according to ChatGPT. Okay, it may or may not be fully correct. Summarizing what Dipankar Gupta says. First point, he situates caste and social stratification more broadly as issues deeply embedded in every stratified society, not just something confined to India. He argues for caution against overly moralistic or reductive views of caste, pointing out that inequalities often persist even when legal or formal caste-based discrimination is abolished. That's where West Bengal comes in, doesn't it? He emphasizes that caste intersects strongly with class and economic inequalities. I agree. So, socioeconomic status often compounds or interacts with caste identity to shape life chances. He stresses the importance of empirical sociological analysis instead of idealistic or normative rhetoric. Understanding caste must involve careful study of how hierarchical social structures operate in everyday life. He warns that focusing only on high profile cases or instances of overt discrimination can obscure the subtler, systemic, and structural ways that caste or caste like stratification shapes opportunity, identity, and social mobility. This point applies for West Bengal so much, doesn't it? My example of if me and my vocalist get into a fight in West Bengal, it will be called a fight between a vocalist and a music producer. If he and I have that same fight in UP or Bihar, it will be called a fight between Brahmin beating up a Vaishya. Now, this point by ChatGPT says Dr. Dipankar Gupta warns that focusing only on high profile cases or instances of overt discrimination, focusing only on these things, can obscure the examples which are applicable for West Bengal, which is can obscure the subtler, systemic, and structural ways that caste or caste like stratification shapes opportunity, identity, and social mobility, which is why you may not see caste politics or overt caste based discrimination or even caste-based application of caste-based laws to that extent, to any extent in West Bengal. But you will see that Brahmins, Vaisyas, castes dominate almost every profession, and incidentally, only lower castes die in mostly lower castes die in cases of political massacres and stuff. He draws attention to the role of modern institutions, for example, education, bureaucracy, economic systems, in perpetuating inequalities. Yes, they will, meaning that caste inequalities may morph but don't necessarily vanish with modernization. Yes, only time those same lineages, same families, descendants of same families won't face the discriminations forever and after with modernization, but it is of course a 2-3 generation process. It doesn't go away at all in Bengal because there's no economic mobility, economic disruption. Next point. He suggests that efforts to address caste or analogous social stratification demand long term structural reforms. Legal equality or liminal social reforms are insufficient without addressing deeper socioeconomic stratification. Now, you'll notice that probably Dr. Dipankar Gupta is also going to head to the same way, which is diagnosing caste properly. There, we have an agreement with Surinder, Jodhka, Dipankar Gupta, etc. Their suggestion in the end, even Andre Beti, in the end is that reservations might be necessary, but even if it is not necessary, there must be other things, other freebies given after which reservation works properly, etc. There, that's where we disagree. But why I celebrate these sociologists is because their diagnosis of caste is at least correct, which is wildly wrong in mainstream Indian politics. RSS, BJP, Congress, everyone has a weird view of caste, also known as the Dumontian view on caste. He reflects on how societal change must involve broad social awareness and collective responsibility, rather than treating caste as a problem only for marginalized groups to solve. Okay, now let's get to the video. Let's see what he says. Thank you, Rishabh, for the contribution to West Bengal GDP. He's saying you should ask Professor Bhavan if Yahudi Yaduvunshi hai. Okay, let's start. Dr. Dipankar Gupta, by the way, sounds 50% Shashi Tharoor and 50% Ehsan Nurani. Ehsan Nurani of the trio as Shankar Ehsan Loy. If you all haven't heard his speaking or his interviews, check out his roundtable with Anupama Chopra, along with Vishal, Amit Trivedi, who else? Yeah, that's all. Ehsan Nurani came, Amit Trivedi came, and Vishal and Shekhar came. That's a fantastic discussion about the music industry of India.
Dear friends, my name is Surinder. I teach sociology at JNU. I'm very happy to introduce to you Sir Dipankar Gupta, India's foremost sociologist. We are very happy that he's agreed to speak to us about his career, about his sociology, about the futures of India and sociology discipline. This interview is also being recorded by another sociologist, Dr. Sridhar Bhattacharya, who will not be on the camera, but he is obviously consulting us what to ask, how to take the discussion forward, and we'll perhaps have another occasion to talk to Sridhar about the discussion. So let me begin by...
So it was basically three sociologists hanging out, and then one of them decided, okay, let's shoot a video about our and recording our conversation.
Briefly telling you
So a sociological house party.
about Professor Dipankar Gupta. I've been his colleague in JNU. He retired from JNU in 2009 as he's been professor of sociology. He studied in JNU. He was among the first generation of students who came to JNU to do social sciences. He was a faculty in JNU for nearly 3 decades. Besides JNU, he also taught in Delhi University, another major department of sociology. But then he came back to JNU because once you are in JNU, then it's difficult to work elsewhere. Professor Gupta obviously also traveled abroad and taught in many universities. And he has very extensively published. He's published 23 books and he has also published 3 novels. And these are not the only things. He obviously has published 100 plus research papers. But more than that, perhaps, are his newspaper articles. He publishes even now in Times of India, earlier in Indian Express, and many other journals. Dipankar Gupta perhaps was also a star sociologist when the television channel became very popular. He used to be one face that would be present whenever they needed a kind of, sociologist to comment on things. Later on, others also started coming. But he's been a kind of, star in many different ways in the way he does his sociology, in the way he presents it. So he's kind of given a new kind of visibility and dignity to the discipline of sociology and made it much more popular, took it beyond the university departments. So, Mr. Gupta, you in some sense come from a slightly different background, unlike many of us who came to sociology from certain background. I know your father was a very senior bureaucrat and you grew up in Bombay and then you came to Delhi. You could have gone to corporate sector. You could have gone to bureaucracy, Indian bureaucracy. These were the kind of main choices that young people like you would have made when you came to sociology. So would you tell us something about what motivated you to come to sociology?
Well, it's like this, that when I was 19 years old, a little under 19, I was denied admission in Delhi University because I was underage. So I spent some time in the university campuses looking at different departments and basically loafing around. And then I came to Delhi School of Economics and looked at the curriculum, sociology. I was attracted to it. I applied and I got it. At that time, my intention really was not academics, but to join the civil services. So I had thought that in two years I'll be 21, ready for civil service. But by the time I was 20, within a year, I met these extraordinary scholars in Delhi School of Economics. Professor Andre Bete, Professor N. Srinivas, Amartya Sen, Shukumar Chakrabarti.
Holy shit. That's quite the Avengers ensemble of sociologists. Andre Bete is one of our other highly respected, heroic, celebrated sociologists from this channel. We are judging these senior scholars, guys. Yes, Choti Muh Badi Baat has its own fun, doesn't it? So yes, we like Andre Bete. Even he, in fact, has gone on to say reservations won't work. That's probably because of the reasons that people like Mr. Teltumbre talk about. That first, baki sab kuch free mein de do, uske baad reservation kaam karega. And he talks about M.N. Srinivas as well. That guy was probably the first one who started the fight, the battle against Dumo's misrepresentations of Indian caste system.
Chaudhary, and it was like a revelation. When some people say that you see a flash of light and you become a religious convert, it was something like that. And I didn't want to be in the civil services anymore. I wanted to be like them. And that's how I switched. I think by the time I was 20, I was quite clear I wanted to be an academic. But it didn't begin that way. It ended that way. And even then, I think I'm quite fortunate because I know many people who come to academics much later and sometimes by default. But in my case, it was by choice, but it was at the age of 20. At that time.
Yeah. There was another thing that, when I came to sociology, that was in the 1980s, you would have been 1 decade before me. Sociology was somehow seen as a kind of conservative discipline, unlike economics, where economists were in planning commission. They were talking about, changing the world. Political scientists obviously had their own kind of, place. Sociology was very kind of small discipline and still struggling to be visible. So how do you see the journey of sociology over the last 40 years, 50 years, that you have seen the discipline and you first were introduced to the discipline, and now that, we are kind of quite a huge discipline globally as well as nationally? What has changed and how do you kind of look at it?
Yeah, when Dr. Dipankar Gupta started out, in that era at least, sociology wasn't that far left leaning like it became later on.
I think we were very fortunate in the sense that during those years, we had some brilliant sociologists, from Srinivas to Bete to Jito Borai, the kind of intellect which is very rare, hard to find. And you wouldn't find that galaxy of stars in any department, maybe economics, in D school and sociology. They were kind of, almost at par. And one was, more glamorous than the other. So it was difficult to choose between them. I think these people really made sociology a highly respectable discipline. Had it been anywhere else with the ordinary run-of-the-mill, it may have still struggled. But the kind of launch that we got with them, I think has been forever, lasted till now. We still think of them as, torchbearers. I am personally very indebted to them because they were my teachers as well. And I saw them in action and it was just amazing. You felt so inspired. And not just the way they spoke or whatever, but the dedication to discipline. They would sit at the typewriter and they would type away, or they would read, and they were really interested in that. And if you told them that there's a vice chancellorship somewhere or a job in the university, in the bureaucracy, they would scoff at it. They were not interested in any of those positions. I've seen that happen.
So they were true scholars, and of course, you find similarities with this kind of behavior with non-evil, non-corrupt Brahmins as well. A bit of asceticism, that I'm dedicated to my craft here. I don't need other fancy stuff. I don't need job positions here and there, but everything corrupts.
In front of me, my professors were tempted, I should say, like Lucifer tempted God, to join the Ministry of Defense. And they said, what? I'm not a clerk. I'm an academic. So he said that also people like I was 20 years old. It made me feel so different. I felt really energized. I felt I was, belonged to a league which was a select group of people. So you can imagine what it is like at that age. And I have never been disappointed by my decision.
At some level, you also kind of moved away from them. For example, if I was to talk to M.N. Srinivas or Andre Bete in 1980s or late 70s, all of them would have told you to go to a village or study the Indian caste system or maybe agrarian social structure. You were somebody who, in a sense, revolted. When you came to sociology, you perhaps one of the few people who went to city. And you went to city not to study urban neighborhoods, not to study urbanization processes, not to study urban cultures. You went to study something which most sociologists have seen that it is a kind of India's digression into communal conflict. So it was Shiv Sena, and everyone used to talk about Shiv Sena in a very kind of condescending manner, that these are communalists, these are.
So at a time when every sociologist is going to the villages to study caste, he went to the cities to study communalism and regionalism and caste's existence in the cities.
These are conservative people who are trying to, in some sense, fight against India's modernity and urbanization. But you came up with a different kind of perspective. You didn't take up the categories like communalism, which was very popular in JNU those days, and your PhD was in JNU. So what is it that moved you away from village studies and study of caste and study of communal conflict to something which was kind of much more, in some sense, now when we look at it, it was the right way to do?
You see, at that time, I am indebted to all these professors I mentioned to you. Of them, I think Professor Bete, when he wrote his book on caste, class, and power, what impressed me about that book was he took a village, but he very, up front, he put the village in India. And I found that to be a good move, because we were usually talking about the village as if it is there, in cocoons somewhere. But Andre Bete brought the village as part of India. And I think he didn't probably stress it as much as he could have, but he introduced that idea very powerfully. And that's what was, I think, a very important input in me. But I didn't quite go along with it because of one thing, and that is that at that time, there was the counterculture Marxist movement in India and the world. And we at that...
No, Neon. Surinder Jodhka was saying that people usually research that stuff that way with that lens. You didn't do it.
State were very impressed by it. And not without reason, because as you know, in my view, even today, Marx, Durkheim, and Levi-Strauss are three outstanding, academic thinkers. I think so even today. But in those days, there was a kind of a revulsion against this lot of people. Even Levi-Strauss, they were reluctant to talk about him. And I think that was a kind of conservatism that was not really very healthy. So people like me began to think differently, and sometimes we were a little too rash in our way of putting things across. And then JNU came around. And when JNU came, there were some professors in JNU and vice chancellors and all that who had a bent of mind where left thinking was, very de rigueur. You can't do it, it's all right. So that's how we came to JNU. And in my transition was not simply because I thought village studies weren't really worth it, but because I felt that there was this movement going around in Bombay, which is a city I loved, and I didn't understand why this movement was happening. Where you're using religion and tradition and past and history for something which is very contemporary and separating people. How did it start? How can culture be used to separate people? Of course, this is a popular Marxist theme, so one was attracted to it. But at the same time, I felt that this is not simply about cultures clashing. There is a question, a very important aspect of the nation state involved. Because it was not just somebody saying that you're an outsider, which is very easy to understand, but they were also including the fact that you don't quite belong to this nation state. And we are the authentic children, and you are not. Because, in the nation state, the mother is a kind of a symbol. So we are all in some ways children of that mother. So it's a naturalization of politics, So if you say that, I'm the authentic child, you're probably foster child, So that was the difference which I found. And then I realized that the ethnicity aspect is very important, but ethnicity brings in the nation state as a central feature. And what is most important of the nation state is not how it became a nation state, but what is most important is what does a nation state do when it becomes a nation state. And what it does, in my view, I still hold on to it, that it makes the territory of the nation state sacred. And that I found was a way by which I could understand Shiv Sena better than just saying that, Maharashtrian versus non-Maharashtrian, Hindu versus Muslim. It wasn't quite that. Without the nation state, it wouldn't be girded the way it was.
Just for the younger people, this was
Fascinating stuff. If someone can Google, please find out what was the exact PhD thesis topic of Dr. Dipankar Gupta. I couldn't find any. But anyway, so look at his way of understanding Shiv Sena. He wasn't looking at it from just the lens of regionalism. They hate Biharis, Maharashtrian versus non-Maharashtrian, etc. Or Marathi versus non-Marathi. He was looking at it how it exists in a nation state or its characteristic features that interact with the concept of a nation state. This is fun stuff. Retro is saying, Dada, can I share a piece of my life with you? I'm going through some stuff that I'd like to get some insights without sharing much of my... You shouldn't because it's the internet after all. But let's see what is up. Go ahead, Retroive. Leon is saying, is it just me or is there some background? Yeah, there is background noise from their live stream, not from mine.
Professor Gupta's PhD thesis, which he did with Professor Yogendra Singh from JNU, from Center for the Study of Social Systems. So very proud of the fact that he did his PhD from JNU. But I know this also, even though you say that you were influenced by Marxism and Marxist thinkers and Marxist scholarship that was happening in JNU, but this would have been odd for JNU as well when you come back and talk about Shiv Sena and use kind of like you were trying to understand the grounds. Normally Marxists would tend to go and will be preoccupied with category of class and see how class struggle is being violated. So they already have a kind of political position, and your work did not work with that kind of political position. So how was it received by your colleagues and students on the campus of JNU when you were talking about your PhD?
You see, I found that my PhD thesis was in some ways misinterpreted. Many people had not read my thesis, but they assumed that because I was kind of left of center, I must have gone there with an agenda, But I didn't go with an agenda at all. I didn't have a political agenda. And even I wrote it when I was 23, 24 years old, my thesis. It was eventually accepted when I was 25, I think. But if you There's Marx, there is Levi-Strauss, there is Parsons, there's Amitai Etzioni, a whole range of authors, and not just the Marxists. And even amongst Marxists, there were some dissidents who were very important. So I found that eclecticism very interesting and inspiring. And eclecticism is something that doctrinaires don't like. So initially, when I wrote my thesis,
should we bring in Nietzsche a little here? Okay, doctrinaires don't like eclecticism, and kind reminds me of Nietzsche's my favorite quote by Nietzsche, that a sane mind is okay with irony, is okay with uncertainties. The pathological mind only looks for certainties and guarantees and absolutes.
working on it. Some people come and tell me, well done, we need to bury that organization. I said, well, I'm not about burying that organization. I'm studying it. If it buries or not is not.
Right. See the difference between him and other Marxists. They were excited when he started researching on Shiv Sena, and they decided, okay, they're good job, Dipankar. Let's research it in a way. Let's write the paper in a way so that we are able to bury this organization. That's the goal that they are beginning the research with. See how immoral and unethical that is, how dishonest that is. And Dipankar Gupta was not starting that research with that kind of an intention.
Of my business, and sometimes that would disappoint many people. And what's also disappointing to many people was that what kind of a left wing are you when you talk about Parsons and Etzioni and Levi-Strauss and all that stuff? But if I didn't have them sitting on my shoulder and telling me what to do, I don't think I would have developed at all. I think all of this cross current, this interaction, this conversation is so important for us, and we should not. I believe this is something where all of us should be mindful of, and not to be too doctrinaire about any position you take.
That's all I ask of anybody, whether it's right wingers or leftists. Okay, Neon is saying, please never hesitate to bring in Nietzsche. Rishabh is saying, why would a Marxist dislike Shiv Sena? A group of impoverished Bhumiputras fighting against non-local capitalists. Biharis have done settler colonialism in Mumbai after all. You would think so, wouldn't you, Rishabh? They would probably say that no, but they are landholders or culturally privileged natives who are further impoverishing and oppressing and being violent towards further proletariats who have just come for an honest day's work. Retroev is saying something interesting. Retroev is saying, I'm having to work under young peeps like 24, 25-year-old non-Bengali peeps who have zero understanding of the situation here, but they have been at this company for 2 years, hence being senior than me. I don't know how should I act with them. So they are non-Bengali 24, 25-year-olds who are in Kolkata or from Kolkata, or are they working in Kolkata? And they are not understanding the gravity of the situation in Bengal, or are they just simply normies and liberals or leftists? What's the situation exactly? And were you trying to convert them politically? Is that how you met a brick wall? Basically, humanity is saying caste is based on occupation, not birth. Subconscious caste, yes. Some theories exist about in favor of the birth-based argument as well. Tim says, okay, let's continue.
And this is something that kind of continues to be very important, what one should say, concern for all sociologists, because we also want to be accepted. We want to be accepted by, for example, people who we are researching. We want to be accepted by our colleagues. And if you empirically find something different from what is seen as the right way of thinking about those things, it becomes a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, because
you see, that's where honesty comes in. That's where the desperation to be accepted by your colleagues versus the desperation to be accepted by the group you're researching, or the desperation, or simply the lack of desire to be accepted by anybody and saying fuck you to everyone. Those are the personality traits that will in the end affect your quality of research and your legacy.
It's true on both sides, by the way.
Yeah.
Even the conservative side, they also have an idea of what is right
Yeah.
and who to quote and who not to quote. And so it works both ways. And that is why to be an academic, one has to be true to oneself, and that's it, nothing else.
Yes.
If you think you should quote Parsons, go ahead. If you think
Like Metallica said, nothing else matters. Just be true to yourself, don't be doctrinaire, and hate everyone equally. Say fuck you to everyone.
you've got something to do with village studies, fine. But this is a point that Fichte made once. That is, if you believe in something sincerely, not because the market is telling you or because it's popular, if you believe in something sincerely, it is true. You know?
So yeah, I mean, we all want to be, in some sense, accepted by the discipline. Want to be also, relevant to our times. That what we are doing, obviously, is something that other people are also thinking on similar lines. But at the same time, we also know that if you see something on ground being very different from what is popular, it's our kind of professional responsibility to bring it out and put it in the best possible language, as you said, that this is the truth.
Yeah.
The truth is not something which is static forever.
Yeah.
Truth is what kind of comes around. Yeah. So I mean, again, in some sense, all of us have done perhaps that you started with city and you started with ethnicity, but then you do come back to caste. You do come back to the classroom discussions on Dumo and inequality and stratification, which was very mainstream. And that also takes you to the village, and you talk about peasantry. And I think your contributions have been very, very widely referred to and read. And article of village remains a very controversial article. People disagree, even I disagree on that, right? But let's start talking about caste, because that again is something which kind of passionately divides people. And they have different opinions also, partly because they have their own positions and their own stakes in the way caste should be talked about, the way caste should be conceptualized. And I still remember, I think your critiques of Louis Dumo were very popular. And I also remember reading that article 2-3 times. There were 2-3 papers that you published in EPW. And they were really very, very important kind of contributions to critiques of Dumo. Just say something about that.
Well, again, here there was a bit of a
Before he starts his discussion on caste, finally, and Dumo, we will check out a bit of comments and have a sip of green tea, and then we'll start, because lots of comments have come. Okay, retrovising working here for the past 6 months, but not from here, and also some of them extreme leftists, but working here and not understanding the gravity of the situation. Oh, what to do in this scenario? If you're asking me as a missionary of political ideologies, I can't really answer this, because depends on how much of a friend they are to you. If they get into casually debating and stuff, then of course you can implant subtle thoughts, subtle questions, and not push too hard at that very moment. You have to let that idea grow and take shape inside their brains. If they are friends, that's good enough. If they're not friends at all, if it's just colleagues who are randomly bantering over politics every now and then the best thing is, in the end, to not debate them, really, because debating is a spectator sport. Unless there are people watching, there's no point you debating a leftist, because you lose a few brain cells and a few IQ points. Unless you're getting paid or people are watching, not waste your time debating leftists unless they're friends. Okay, then we basically humanoid is saying, in Chandogya Upanishads, it nowhere talks about discrimination. Outcast doesn't mean untouchable. Yeah, fair enough. I'm with you. Uh, I I believe that a lot of Hindus agree with you, and a lot of Hindus believe what you are saying is true. But since I lose so many subscribers every now and then, so many proper casteist trads disagree and shower me with quotes from here and there. So I don't care about what text says what. I only am bothered about what happens in reality in India. Delhi protesters are pro Hidma, in your opinion? Oh, yes. That's how leftists take a position on everything. Like Jordan Peterson had said once in his legendary GQ magazine interview to that interviewer that uh, y'all are ultimately simply being ideological. You are talking like, you are behaving like, you are operating like, you're thinking like party comrades, party cadre. Y'all are mugging up manifestos, not really reading stuff in universities. These are not what John Peterson said. I'm kind of extending upon what he said, but the main line he said, very very fun, was that once I know one thing about you, I know everything else about you, about your views and positions. That was so fascinating and profound, isn't it? And that works to so accurately. It always hits the bullseye. You get hold of one leftist from one movement, okay? Let's say this hidma slash pollution protest. You know, therefore, he is in favor of hidma. He is allegedly opposed to pollution. He is definitely there in the dog protests as well, of which I'd be very supportive. And he is definitely a far leftist. He hates RSS. He hates BJP. He likes Palestine. He hates Israel. He would like to work in USA, but he hates USA. He loves West Bengal. He loves Kolkata, but he won't work in West Bengal or Kolkata. And he believes all North Indian states are casteist. West Bengal is not. And he probably hates Joe Rogan. He hates Donald Trump. And here's the most fun one. He is he's ideologically, conceptually speaking, he's a moral supporter of veganism, but is not vegan himself. About 200 of this entire group in the entire country is probably vegan, but rest of them have absolutely nothing, no argument against veganism. They do actively support and give moral courage to his vegan friends, but he can't just quit butter chicken and the taste of good pork and beef. So they are just party cadre. For example, if someone is officially a BJP supporter, you know that yes, he hates socialism, but he likes integral humanism. He thinks Nehru was against free speech, but he likes the idea of Ranveer Elabadia getting harassed. He shares powerful images of fat women police officers holding their babies to a physically demanding and dangerous job. That kind of stuff. Once you know one thing about him, you know everything else about him, his positions. Or Trinamool, okay? Uh, thinks CPM was bad, communism is bad, but freebies given by Mamata Banerjee are great. And let's say Bengali pride is a great thing. And it's because of Gujus and Marwaris that Bengalis are lagging behind in business and stuff. You know one thing about them, you know everything else about them. So, yes, to make a gist of my answer, yes, Delhi protesters are definitely fucking netly pro Hidma. What else would they be? Would they be protesting against pollution and be pro Israel? Would they be pro Hidma and hate veganism? No. Some of them would probably hate veganism. They are the they are the a little farther of the far left, so they become join hands with the Indian Hindu right wing. So they say veganism is an oppressor's agenda to fuck with milk sellers of India slash uh, further PETA's interests, etc. It gets all muddled up when the horseshoe is that fucking crazy. There's just way saying, you brother, this is off topic, but could you talk about in a separate video about growing racism against Indians and racist videos some white bloggers make in India, like Bald and Bankrupt? Yes, yes. Um, uh, because of their videos on India, some very interesting discourses have come about. There are foreigners who are defending India, saying that, oh yes, so many of you all only make these kinds of videos. You all don't show the good side of India. There are other vloggers who are countering this by coming to India and shooting the good side of India as well. More importantly, we are now having a very, very honest discussion and debate amongst ourselves as well about our um, shitty civic sensibilities and municipal non-accountability of the municipal corporations. So in general, it's all good, but the overall rise in racism against Indians, that's not organic. That's not done by these vloggers. That's mainly done, I think, by Ron DeSantis' supporters. It's his bots who are working everywhere from around the world. they have joined hands because they are waiting for 2832 so that Vivek Ramaswamy doesn't fuck Ron DeSantis' career anymore ever again. India exploded after Akash Singh. Oh my god, Akash Singh. कितना कितना ज्ञान झाड़ रहा था. तो वो Myron Gaines का career was almost exposed. It was almost, he had almost made a fool out of himself. He had almost become the butt of all jokes. Akash Singh's blind faith on his marriage, and you are supposed to have blind faith on your marriage. What else kind of faith would you have on your marriage? But his blind faith on such a crazy woman rejuvenated the fucking career of Myron Gaines. Where are the कितने comment आ गए भाई? I have never been recommended more anti-Indian racist videos than any time than the last 3 weeks. Yeah. Neon basically, Indian male. Not very concerned about what he does going forward, but pretty devastating that we lost a potential ambassador. Pollution was a cover-up for Hidma. Hello, polymerist. We broke through several glass ceilings as an assertive Hindu and India only for his wife. Yes, I agree with Malecha here on the racism being artificial. Tourism potential. Akash Singh ban gaya beta. Akash beta ban gaya Akash beta. Ball and backdrop did a 180. Akash issue is non-India related. How is it non-India related? Huh? It's not. It's about an image of an Indian descendant and a Hindu. If Vivek Ramaswamy is in some ways the pride of an Indian father, a Hindu, you might disagree that Vivek Ramaswamy has remotely anything to it. He's just another American. What India? What Hinduism? But since I take pride in Vivek Ramaswamy, I'll have to share the shame of Akash Singh. PETA gave West Bengal best vegan state. What fucking horseshit. I have, oh my god. Yeah, that was pure horseshit. Excuse me, संस्कार यही होंगे. I have a very low opinion of NRI. Alright. Okay, let's continue now.
Critiques of Dumo. Just say something about that.
Well, again, here there was a bit of an accident again. I was in Surat those days. My first job was in Surat, and IP Desai gave me that job. I mean, he was such a benefactor.
So, by the way, Dumo is the guy, okay? Dumo is the guy whose views... Basically, people... Dumo had many intellectual ancestors as well who were working in India since the time of the British Raj, post-1857, extra documentation, rigidification further of the caste system, etc. So, Dumo's views on caste, that the Brahmin is inherently the most powerful deep state guy, no matter what his landholding, etc., in the entirety of India, all that happened with Dumo. And all these people, Dipankar Gupta, Rumila Thapar, Irfan Habib, Surinder Jodhka, Sumit Guha, Declan Quigley, Andre Beti, all these people have countered that view. And now, Mr. Jodhka, Dr. Jodhka asks Dr. Dipankar Gupta about his counters to Dumo.
Contributions to critiques of Dumo. Just say something about that.
Well, again, here there was a bit of an accident again. I was in Surat those days. My first job was in Surat, and IP Desai gave me that job. I mean, he was such a benefactor. While I was there, I met this woman who was working at home, and then we know how it is. You get chatting and you get to know her. So one day we were sitting together, and she told me that she was not a Dubla, like she was introduced to me as a member of Dubla caste. This is considered to be low caste.
Holy shit, Dubla is a caste. Fuck.
But she was a Rathore Rajput actually. And then I said, well, you're imagining things. He said, no, my ancestor.
No, we all know what Akash Singh's opinion on freedom of speech status in India is. That doesn't make him not Indian descendant or not Hindu.
And then I said, well, you're imagining things. He said, no, my ancestor, long back, he was the king of this area, etc. So when I went to the village, I found that her community in the village all believed that. So she was not the deviant, she was actually expressing a point of view. That led me to look at origin tales of castes.
Origin Tales of Caste. We have to now talk about the legendary Hitesh Ranjan Sharnal, whose paper we have discussed under the video title called How to Buy Your Caste, where he shows how people could randomly make up genealogies, buy genealogies. You could hire a Brahmin to make up your own random genealogy that you're descended from that legendary king or that god, etc. That depended on some amount of wealth. And the example again, Hitesh Ranjan Sharnal notices in some villages of Bengal, everyone is Teli. In some villages, they have made up a distinct caste called Tili, which is higher than Telis. In some villages, Telis are higher than Tilis. In some villages, there are no distinctions. But this entire hullabaloo fiasco is because some people get hold of, accumulate some wealth, and hire a Brahmin to do their family history attestation, SIR, fake Aadhaar kind of thing.
And then I found quite by chance, Risley and Tobin and others who had recorded origin tales of hundreds of castes. And that's when I began to think seriously about one basic flaw in our education, that when we were taught caste system, nobody told us that there were different origin tales in the caste order. It is not the Purusha Sukta legend that everybody believes in, or everybody is even aware of. When I began to look into the number of caste origin tales, I was inspired to do some research myself. And what I found then was that there's not one origin tale, no matter which caste. You might say so and so is a leather worker or sweeper, whatever. Not one caste has an origin tale which says, I do belong to a base class, my substances are base, my blood is bad, my skin is bad, my bone is bad, I deserve to be here. Not one caste says it. Every caste says that I actually belong over there.
Now, here is my point. Some texts or the others say some caste belong here, some caste belong there. But no caste, no members of a caste say, I am lower caste, Everyone says, I used to be higher, or they say, I am higher, and everyone else is lying. So who really is following texts? No one cares about texts and scriptures. Rishabh is saying he may be Hindu, but the lions of Sarnath aren't on his passport, so I cared for his opinions on India as I would any Guras. Here, Rishabh, we would have to discuss what do you mean by caring about someone's opinion in the first place. Practically speaking, we don't really care for anybody's opinion in India if they are an outsider. But the point is, whether we like it or not, whether we care it or not, will it impact things? And that's where his name, his religion, his descent comes into place. So whether we like it or not, whether he likes it or not, whether we want it or not, whether he wants it or not, he will implicitly, inherently always be an ambassador for India and Hinduism because he is a descendant of Indians and he's a Hindu. You can't help it. It's just natural and organic.
I'm as good as everybody else, perhaps better. You are born on the head of Brahma. I was born on the eye.
Yeah.
The eye is even purer than the head. That kind of fine distinction. As I say, obsession with these fine distinctions, what made caste so difficult.
I'm not forcibly making him Indian. His name is Akash Singh. No one understands what that name means except people in India, in the entire world, and Mauritius maybe. Why do you think that is? Does he not have anything to do with this country? You think we can excommunicate people out of our own accord, or just because you one fine morning hate somebody? I won't accept anybody's excommunicating anyone else because people who excommunicate will want to excommunicate on random things. Maybe they'll excommunicate Vivek for wearing a suit and tie. Maybe some days they'll like Vivek for not naming himself Vicky. Maybe they'll excommunicate again Vivek for celebrating Thanksgiving. Maybe they'll not excommunicate and celebrate Vivek again for talking about his dharm on Andrew Schulz's podcast. तो ये excommunicators वालों, तुमको मुबारक, तुम्हारा excommunication. हर दिन किसी के ऊपर अचानक से गुस्सा हो गया, अचानक से प्राउड हो गए. My point is not that whether you should be or should not be proud. My point is that whatever he does is a reflection of Hindu society and Indian society in general. So there lies our problem, because whether white Americans like it or not, uh, up until the time when Vivek actually pissed them off, Vivek's words were also a reflection of Hindu society and Hindus in general and India, because he's that guy. He comes from that culture and is that well spoken and well educated and stuff. If we didn't let white people say that, oh no, there's nothing Indian or Hindu about him, then I can't accept other people saying there's nothing Indian or Hindu about Akash Singh.
Understand for some people. But what made it good for me, interesting for me, was I found that caste therefore is not unique, is not strange, is not exotic. Nobody in the world wants to be thought as inferior. Why do people believe that in caste order, people are happy to be inferior and considered as so? And this is what I found in Duma.
Exactly. And this is why it's so important to bring that point again, that people like Dumo or his intellectual ancestors who came to the conclusion that no matter what the geography of India, no matter which state, no matter what the amount of land the Brahmin holds, it is the Brahmin who's definitely the Dada here, jiske chacha vidhayak hai. That's because their informers were Brahmins, Bengali Brahmins, Tamil Brahmins. They talked to Brahmins. They were experts in Sanskrit. They read texts where the text also said Brahmins are Dada here and there. And they decided, therefore, Brahmins are Dada everywhere. Now, if they had, in fact, their informers had been Jats, they would say Jats oppress everyone else in the entire country.
People are happy to be inferior and considered as so. And this is what I found in Duma. In Duma's understanding, people of the lower caste, quote unquote lower caste, there's no such thing called low caste, by the way, in my view, the so called low caste. I've written about the so called low caste as well. According to Michael Moffat, that they participate in their own subjugation happily. That's absolutely untrue.
Right.
It is because people believe that the low caste participate in their own subjugation that the caste order system is not seen as so unique. These Indians are very strange people. So many of them believe they are actually low. But when I did the origin tales, I found that this is not true. Indians are very normal people. That, like other normal people, no category thinks that they're actually low, but they are forced to believe it because of circumstances.
And we'll have to unpack this but last sentence here a little, but just to make another point, Dumo and his intellectual ancestors, since they were Sanskrit experts, and since they saw that Sanskrit text said Brahmins are the most important ones here and there, regardless of, because the text won't talk about how much land grants they got and which point Brahmins at which point are saying that they are superior than everybody else without going through their bank accounts and how much land they hold, etc. So Dumo thought that, oh, okay, this is just like texts everywhere else. People just write texts and other people follow those texts. And so Indians are so stupid. Maybe he didn't say it that derogatorily, but the conclusion was kind of that only. That, okay, so these, stupid poor people just follow those random Sanskrit texts and they are happy to be lower castes. Dipankar Gupta finds out that is not the case. Now, Dipankar Gupta in this sentence says they are not like that, but they are forced to be like that. I wonder what that means. I hope he explains this further.
They're actually low, but they are forced to believe it because of circumstances. They think.
Is that sentence possible? Do you not believe yourself to be lower, but you are forced to believe you are lower? I guess, well, reading into it too much, I guess he just means that you may not consider yourself lower than somebody, but it's just society, your family wealth, your education level, which has kept you in a position which is lower than many other people in society. I guess he means that.
Of themselves differently. Now, if they were to extravert what they think, they would be persecuted.
Okay, Nikita Lalsa has discovered internet in 2025. He's saying, which Indian wife talks shit about his husband on social media? These are not Sanatani values. Well, Sanatani values are 10,000 years old. Internet is popular for 5 years, okay? Wait it out. You'll get lots of Sanatani values, such Sanatani values from lots of Indian women. थोड़ा सबर करो, थोड़ा धक्का मुक्की मत करो, थोड़ा ठहरो.
And even today it happens. If a certain caste is wearing a turban, other caste object, and often they are beaten up. But from inside, every caste has a very strong opinion of where they come from. I think this is something which was the most important, understanding for me. And I thought that why weren't we told that there are as many origin tales as there are castes? Why were we made to believe that this Purusha Sukta legend is the only legend?
Yeah.
When I was researching in West UP, I often asked people in West UP, do you know the Purusha Sukta legend? They said, what? The Purusha Sukta, what are you talking about? They had no idea. And yet, in the classroom, we were given to understand that every Indian knew, every Hindu.
सब कोई पुरुष सुक्त और मनुस्मृति बैठ के ही एकदम सुबह से शाम कास्ट फॉलो करता है. एकदम ज्योति बासु भी जिस दिन मोरिंचापी मैसाकर अनाउंस किया होगा उस दिन सुबह उठ के 4-5 पेज थोड़ा स्किम थ्रू कर लिया. चैट जीपीटी को बोला कि मनुस्मृति का एक जिस दो मुझे चैट जीपीटी, जिसमें बोला गया कि मारो नमशूद्रों को मोरिंचापी में, और फिर ज्योति बासु ने जाके मार दिया उन लोगों को. ऐसा होता था according to Dumontian sociologists.
Knew the Purusha Sukta legend, which is complete fiction. So this is the main reason I found Dumont not only unacceptable, actually, it was something which is insulting.
Offensive, yeah. I also find you more offensive, and not just this legend, but also something like Manusmriti. Everyone talks about Manusmriti as the canonical text of Hindu religion. How many temples, if there is any, in India or globally of Hindus, which would have Manusmriti kept as a canonical sacred text? Nobody has that. Not that it's not there, but there's another level on which kind of already. Yeah, sorry.
Give a point on this.
Yeah.
If you read the Manusmriti, you will find that there are so many contradictions.
Yes.
Manusmriti at one point, the early pages particularly, talk about women being, low.
Yes, that is why I cannot in my right mind take the Manusmriti seriously, because I realize how much it has been tampered with, even though I did not read the full Manusmriti translation. I read the Arya Samaji Manusmriti translation, where it has been kind of tampered with by Arya Samaj themselves, because they wanted to kind of take away the more controversial ones. Even then there are controversial stuff. Even then there are contradictions. That here musicians are supposed to be Shudras or self-employed people. Here musicians are supposed to get arrested. Something like that. I can't remember exactly. But on women, there were clearly things that feminists today would shudder to think of. And clearly there were insanely feminist positions in Manusmriti. And most of all, no Brahmin, if they follow Manusmriti, can remain a Brahmin or even would want to be a Brahmin. This is the key point that everyone seems to conveniently ignore. Okay, Manusmriti makes life for a Brahmin absolutely insanely hard as fuck. You cannot live your life with comfort if you follow the Manusmriti. That's why nobody follows it. Just a few days back, our viewer Tenoheka Banzai tagged me in a post on Twitter. That's some Brahmin guy who's a millionaire and stuff, owns a lot of wealth. Somebody was talking about him proudly that, see, he's a Brahmin who's so rich and stuff. Our viewer tagged me saying that, see, if Rajamanu had seen this, he himself would burn Manusmriti. मैंने क्या लिखा और क्या follow किया गया.
Lower than men, and they should be bossed around and so forth. We keep reading it. There are sections which say that the woman's position is very important. If we don't respect your elder family member who's a woman, then in the Manusmriti you will find that there are so many contradictions. Manusmriti at one point, the early pages particularly, talk about women being, lower than men, and they should be bossed around and so forth. We keep reading it. There are sections which say that the woman's position is very important. If you don't respect your elder family member who's a woman, then your household will never be prosperous. You must respect the woman, which leads me to believe that Manusmriti was not written by one person.
Right.
Yes.
Written by many people and their different points of view. Somehow they were put together across centuries, perhaps.
Exactly what I was going to add. I was about to pause for saying that only. It was across a gigantic timeline that everything accumulated into the Manusmriti. Just like all other texts, Ramayana, Mahabharata, there are lakhs of versions for this reason only.
So to quote a canonical text or to quote a text and say it's canonical is wrong.
That's right.
I mean, Manusmriti, I can find so many different versions of it in Manusmriti.
Yeah.
I can find different versions of Arthashastra in Arthashastra. So to say that Arthashastra said this doesn't make sense. So
Which is why Sanatana economics says this, XYZ, also makes no sense. Because at least there's a book called Arthashastra, there's no book called Sanatana economics as of now.
These texts also evolve along with the way world evolves, right? And that kind of brings us to the earlier classical discussion within Indian sociology, which is kind of coined by Surinder, from book view to field view of society. At some level, it's kind of unnecessary, because book is also field at some level, right? But at the same time, the field has to be also critically engaged with, rather than just read and interpreted, right? So again, when you're talking about caste, and this again brings us to perhaps we should say a little more about Yumo, that how that framework of trying to make sense of India through certain kind of canonical ancient text remains very, very popular. And it remains not only popular with some kind of political establishment, but also with social scientists. Why is it that Indian sociologists are drawn to this kind of textual sources? Globally, nowhere else anthropologists or sociologists would read text and say, this is how Christianity is lived in a village of Germany or France.
see, if they do it,
What a great question. And this is so fruitful for our side of the discourse. This is exactly what we are saying, because they don't want to solve problems, because they are paid to maybe have anti-India, anti-Hindu views, dare I say. Why else would you do that? What no other persons from your branch of study do in other countries, for other societies, other cultures, other civilizations? Why would you do that only and only in India, only for Hinduism? We know the reason. Okay, Zirat is saying, kahan gaya? Wait. Yeah, Manusmriti acknowledges existence of Brahmin works, men and farmers. Yes, but in other parts of the Manusmriti, it's also said that Brahmins are not supposed to do a bunch of things that would require, that would stop them from being a farmer and stuff. Question for you too: was the Manusmriti written as a religious text? What do you mean by uh, religious text versus non-religious text in this context? Because in India's context, religious text itself might, although they are part of the Dharma Shastras, so that should be called a religious text. But it's tough to call it a religious text in the English language, because in English language everything depends on how Europe and Christianity did it. That's not how exactly we did it. Frankly, nobody in the world can just follow books and lead their lives. Some people will do it, but is Manusmriti a religious text? I think it is, but just that not that popular, not that prevalent as is made out to be. It was popular in some fractions, some factions, and some regions in some points of time every now and then. But nobody, of course, thought of burning it, but nobody just bothered about it too much at the same time.
do that in the West, they'll be laughed at immediately.
Besides,
But they're not laughed at in India because it's supposed to be exotic place, and because many Indians also propagate this
investigate.
and they do it to make.
Neon is asking something interesting. He's saying, is Manusmriti Nietzschean in the way of affirmation of life? I haven't read. It is, because it was, whenever most parts of Manusmriti were being added at times when India was pretty stable and Indian society was very life affirming. So if they noticed something going on in society and codified into law and made it prescriptive, saying, see, it works, therefore do it from tomorrow anyway, and you have to do it from tomorrow, those suggestions will come across as life affirming because they were written in a very life affirming situation, in a very life affirming era.
List of sociologists would read text and say, this is how Christianity is lived in a village of Germany or France.
See, if they do that in the West, they'd be laughed at immediately.
Precisely, yeah.
But they're not laughed at in India because it's supposed to be an exotic place, and because many Indians also propagate this.
Investigate.
Yes, and here comes Amartya Sen's criticism of people who say spirituality is for them, science, spirituality is for us, science is for them, etc. We all know who was the main famous person to say it, and he did not mean it in this very reductive, very limiting way. He was making one point in just one context, but people kind of went along with it and made this their banner head, their fucking slogan that साइंस उनको आता है. हाँ, साइंस फाइंस ठीक है, प्रॉस्पेरिटी वगैरह तो होते रहेगा, मगर भाई हमसे ज्यादा, हमसे अच्छा ध्यान कोई नहीं करता है. देखो वो लोग भी इतने अमीर बन गए, उन लोगों को भी तो मेडिटेशन करना ही पड़ रहा है. व्हाट डज दैट शो? हम लोग तो मेडिटेशन करते हैं, हमको तो अमीर नहीं बनना पड़ा, वो लोग अमीर बन के भी मेडिटेशन करते हैं. इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि साइंस उनके लिए है, स्पिरिचुअलिटी हमारे लिए है. Whereas what were our mathematicians and philosophers and physicists who were also rishis, who were also writing texts and reading texts? What the fuck were they doing? A lot of it was science, a lot of it was proto-science. How is then science theirs and spirituality ours? We just did not have such a distinction. Everything gets distorted after how much am I going to worry about getting sued and stuff? But you know, these are very, very Christian moralistic views of Hindu society. It would be fair to say most Hindus, most Hindu leaders, most Hindu spiritual babas, etc., most of them are Christians in their understanding of world and religion.
And they do it to make themselves important or whatever. The principal reason, in my view, is this, that there is always a tendency amongst us human beings, this is Levi Strauss really, to see different people as if they were natural categories. Like a crow will not be an eagle, that kind of stuff. So a Hindu will not be rational like the Christian or the Muslim or whatever. So to put them in little boxes. This is the cultural essentialism you might say. And cultural essentialism sells very well in the way when you're talking about other people. Look at anthropology.
Okay, he's bringing up fascinating stuff here. But by the way, if you are liking what he's saying here, you'll have to remember that he's also going to be opposed to views like there's a clash of civilizations and stuff. These people won't agree with that. They will say they are temporary reflections of certain economic realities and stuff. If you push them too hard on Islam, they might agree to it nonchalantly, reluctantly. Yes, there might be an extra problem with Islam, but mostly it's not a clash of civilizations. Mostly it's people are in general same everywhere. So Indians are not distinctly idiotic or distinctly intelligent, etc.
Like the Christian or the Muslim or whatever. So to put them in little boxes. This is the cultural essentialism you might say. And cultural essentialism sells very well in the way when you're talking about other people. Look at anthropology. In anthropology, you had a war going on, and yet when the Newer was written, there was no mention of the war. As if the Newer live in an isolated planet. So this is the kind of anthropology that was taught because they were seen as culturally unique species. So the Hindus are also made the culturally unique species, and then your supervisor in the West, some university, say, you've done a good job. That is really the right thing to do. I remember talking to a very good friend of mine, and I told him that, why is it that you guys, patronize this kind of sociology? He told me something very interesting. He said, why should I?
Holy shit, he's asking the same. Surinder Jodhka is asking him the questions that we ask about such sociologists and politicians all day long, and that those are the same questions that Dipankar Gupta was asking his friend as well. This is fun stuff.
Patronize this kind of sociology. He told me something very interesting. He said, "Why should I pay you money to come to America and tell me you are like me? I want you to tell me you are different."
Shit.
So it is always very easy and charming to many people to hear about a tribe or community so different, so unique, and they don't look like us, they don't speak like us, and they become kind of a treasure trove of exotic
My God, this is fascinating stuff. This is borderline decoloniality.
knowledge. That is, I think, real reason. Our popular tendency is that there's a cultural essentialism. So if somebody overtakes you and you see that person is, let us say, Sikh, you say, Sikhs drive rash. Then somebody else overtakes you who's not a Sikh, you don't know what to do.
Yeah. Hence my criticism of people who say that the West is successful because of white people or Western people or Westerners. A lot of people who think they disagree with this statement also don't, because a lot of them will say things like Indians are corrupt. How do those non-corrupt Indians then become corrupt Indians become non-corrupt in the USA? So I'm not on board with that cultural essentialism. One particular culture from one place does not signify or imply any one thing or even a fixed set of things.
So the Bengalis are rash. Just think like that. There are always tendencies to make people unique. And that is why people like Dumont are so popular.
So there is this, interestingly, my career also started from Surat. And I also since work on caste, and my interest on caste also started from Surat. But that was 1990-91 when Mandal Commission came and the whole kind of world turned upside down, and caste sat right next to us, and we didn't really have the choice of ignoring it. Right? Then we had to study caste, we had to engage with caste, we had to. But again, this kind of question remains a very problematic question when I look at caste. Why is there so much obsession with looking for one singular framework for caste? And that's where Dumo becomes very convenient. And my own argument is that it is perhaps also because it gives a comfort explanation to nationalists. That, Dumontian kind of way of looking at caste is also a way of looking at India, is also a way of looking at Hindus,
Yeah.
and they all come together. Therefore, there is one.
Hence that famous term coined by Surinder Jodhka in his interview with Kunal Kamra, Bichara Brahmin.
Single India, and which is also Hindu, which has caste system, and caste system has also been a kind of non-conflictual system where everyone participated in it willingly, and that's how our civilizational culture has evolved. So just wondering if you could also say something more on this.
I think you're right, but I want to add a rider to this, and that is that in Dumont, the caste system is one where each person has a position which is known in advance, and those at the bottom of the ladder, as you go down, they become more and more impure till a barrier comes and they become actually impure.
Absolutely.
This is something that doesn't help nationalism. You might say that we all have our own job to do, which is fine. But the moment you bring the purity-impurity complex, nationalism takes a beating. Which is why you'll find that from the time of Savarkar right down till today, caste is always seen as something which is not, and they don't talk about purity impurity as much as division of labor. Division of labor is fine, So you can bring in Gandhiji, you can bring any number of people saying that there's dignity in labor, which is of course a bit of a euphemism. But the purity impurity aspect that Dumont talked about is not mentioned by.
He casually pointed out that Savarkar was opposed to casteism.
And that, I think, has a problem with nationalism.
Precisely.
And for good reason.
Yeah. So also, I think the moment you bring about nationalism, the question of nation state, and that is our next topic. Nation states, nationalism is also a kind of outcome of modernity. Yeah. It's a modern process. And modern process also means that if you say that it is one nation, we are one nation, that also means that we are all citizens. And as citizens, we are obviously.
Stikalmako, isn't Manusmriti followed by proper smarthas and by the people like Puri Shankaracharya, etc.
Equal. And then how do you deal with caste? One level, you don't want to give up on caste because that is what you think your culture is. And at the same time, you also want everyone to be part of that culture, including the Dalit as citizen, because that is the imperative of nation state.
Yeah, you want to make caste friendly, a very benign organization, a benign outfit, which is not. And to make it benign, therefore you do all kinds of adjustments, I suppose, intellectual adjustments. But you see, the other thing about Dumont and that entire way of thinking is, I've been to many seminars abroad, particularly, and where if somebody says that there are many ways of looking at Brahminism, there are many ways of looking at different castes, there is a but opposition almost, that you don't understand the caste order. You don't understand how strict they are, how they observe every rule, which is nonsense. Even in the Indian text, you'll find that they're saying that a Brahmin can do agriculture. A Brahmin's job is not just puja; he can also do agriculture, and there are actual texts which say that. But you were to say that there's a argument about caste politics. Now, if you look at Dumont,
Saurabh Naik is saying, pointing out something very important. He's saying Brahmins I have met do seem to have a bit of superiority complex. Over time, they have become more subtle, but certainly patronizing. Saurabh Naik, this is why I'm saying that in some places in India, caste is conscious. Some places there is subconscious casteism. So in Bengal, Brahmins are also the high-nosed ones, the arrogant ones, looking down upon everyone else. But they won't acknowledge that it has anything to do with casteism, or the Manusmriti, or their own caste. They are simply well-meaning global citizen commies who hate the rest of the citizens of the country who are not believers in global citizen communist ideas. They are ANCAP socialists. I mean, NSOCs, anarcho-socialists. Everyone else is not. Therefore, they look down upon people. So they will always find a reason to look down upon people. The reasoning will be different every now and then, and in different regions.
you cannot explain caste politics, right? So whenever you see caste politics now, people will say this is because of modernity. It's not true. There's always been struggle over caste positions.
Yeah.
You have the Rajput kingdoms coming up, the Jat kingdoms coming up, the Gujara Pratihara kingdom. They were all, in a sense, you might say caste, but they were actually kingdoms fighting for positions of power,
Right.
overthrowing somebody. It just so happens today caste politics.
Which is why 1997 paper by Irfan Habib says that caste system seems to benefit mainly the usurpers. You defeat someone, your caste becomes the most important caste. Where is the Dumontian superior Brahmin everywhere?
Positions of power, overthrowing somebody. It just so happens today caste politics is a daily affair. It doesn't happen once in 200 years, But there's always been tension in the caste order, and this is so important for people to understand. Otherwise, they just see caste as something which is unique, and Indians are funny people. And there was also a stream of thought in anthropology, which said if you want to study India, you must have concepts which are uniquely Indian. You can't use universal concepts. Now, if you have, this is a terrible, terrible thing to happen for discipline. Right?
But you see, this part of the discussion is very, very, very important, guys, because this is where our casteist trad right-wingers have a deep, deep friendship with anti-India, anti-Hindu, Dumontian leftists, because these are the only people in the world who are practically the majority, who agree that caste is distinctly Indian and Hindu. And one side believes it's distinctly Indian and Hindu and awesome, and the other side believes it's distinctly Indian and Hindu and it's a bad thing. Therefore, distinctly India and Hinduism is bad, worse than many other countries and cultures, at least on this metric. And both of them are wrong.
If you have India, you have unique concepts only for India, then what happens to sociology? It's over.
Yeah.
And where does the boundary of India stop?
Exactly. Where the boundary does stop.
Yeah.
And what happens?
Where Surinder Jodhka is saying, where does the boundary of India stop? It definitely doesn't stop in Punjab or West Bengal.
happens to society? What kind of communication
This is also a question Savarkar asked. Where does our boundaries even stop?
to concepts only for India? Then what happens to sociology? It's over.
And where does the boundary of India stop?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where the boundary is stop.
Yeah.
And what happens to society? What kind of communication can I have? Then I can say to you that, I'm Indian and I do Indian sociology. If you Americans don't understand, you Swedes don't understand, is your problem. Some people say that, in fact. I've seen in some women's studies programs, scholarships, that men and women can never communicate fully because of great differences. But the challenge is to overcome differences.
Nobody can communicate fully.
Yeah. But what is science
My
about?
God.
Science
See how old school Dr. Surinder Jodhka and Dipankar Gupta are sounding compared to today's woke commie purple haired sociologists, aren't they? You see, this was just a time in our country. Before these people, before M.N. Srinivasan, it was all Dumuntian. Now, by the time they became old, it's Dumuntian stuff again. क्या हो गया भाई? बीच में बढ़िया चीज चल रहा था. I think Congress had plans to move away from caste narratives because they would have to answer कि देखिए casteism का narrative चल रहा है, casteism पे इतने बुक लिखे जा रहे हैं, casteism बंद ही नहीं हो रहा है allegedly, और आप लोग पावर में हैं तो आप क्या झक मार रहे हैं. Therefore, this, I think, view got promoted in the academia that no, it's not distinctly Indian, it's not distinctly Hindu, it happened everywhere. But then the newcomers decided, wait, let's get back to Dumo. Now, on the gender issue, it's so fascinating that he's even pointing this out, that men and women can't communicate. He's criticizing gender studies directly. Now, it helps that he is about 200 years old. If he was in academia, he would have to come with a hidden face and we would call him also mysterious sociologist, and that's how he would come on our podcast and say these things. What happened? Everyone just got back to Tumo, and Dipankar Gupta is saying these things openly, criticizing gender studies, and Surinder Jodhka laughs at this. This is funny stuff.
differences.
Nobody can communicate fully.
Yeah.
Right?
But
Yeah.
what is science about? Science
Yeah.
is basically about communication.
Yeah.
If you cannot communicate, it's not science.
Yes.
So I think Dumont was actually
Is it these people, I think, believed in the Enlightenment that much, maybe?
not letting people communicate.
So I think also perhaps it's kind of connected with the way India's own self-imagination has evolved, where our obsession with text continues to be the medium through which India's tradition is, in some sense, imagined and constructed. And
See, what happened here was that when nationalism came up,
yeah,
many nationalist leaders, including some sociologists, thinkers, that is, they brought up texts because they got the impression that the British were looking down on us because we didn't have texts, we didn't have proper literature. So there was a kind of a nationalist absurd to demonstrate our literature, which
Yeah, that has been pointed out by Salvatore Babones very importantly in his preface to his book How India Built the Third World's First Democracy, Dharma Democracy. He points out that people, nationalists from all sides of the political aisle, wrote voraciously. It's all in English. Not many Indians read it, but everyone in the world must read it. The kind of defense and criticism for democracy they came up with. It's a very fascinating section in the book. I'm so looking forward to completing that book. What a well-researched, well-written book, guys. If you all haven't bought Professor Bhavanas' book already, definitely do it. It's a phenomenal book. 4 or 5 years of insane rigorous research. The amount of stuff he has read, amount of complete primary sources he has read even before starting writing the book is unbelievable, guys. He has read a mountain of content, books and papers and open letters and editorials, columns for over like 150 years, written over 150 years. And then he has written this book in defense of India's democracy. I would say that any left-leaning guy who is not very patriotic, if he reads this book, he will become a bigger nationalist than all Indian right-wingers. It makes you love India that much harder.
which I think was probably one of the contributory factors.
I would think in the present context, perhaps in
Texts. We didn't have proper literature. So there was a kind of a nationalist.
Now, us not having literature and us, our ancestors, showing off our literature with an extra thrust and importance as a part of their insecurity also makes sense, because the Europeans, wherever they went to colonize, kept saying this thing, this particular they kept making this particular point about all native peoples. Remember, they went to North America, and that's how a kind of racism was born in the first place. They saw that, okay, these are people who don't have a religious holy book. So if you don't have a religious book, it means you are not in contact with a higher power. It means you don't have a spirit. If you don't have a spirit, are you even fully a man? If you don't have a soul, that is. So if you are a Native American who does not have a religious book, who does not converse with God, and also happens to be not white, then 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, and all not non-white people are a little less human because they don't converse with God the way European Christians did.
Absurd to demonstrate our literature, which I think was probably one of the contributory factors.
I would think in the present context, perhaps a much bigger theoretician of caste today is Ambedkar. Ambedkar is not simply a kind of, Dalit activist or a politician or somebody who led Dalit movements, but he's also a very sophisticated theoretician of caste, of democracy, of nation state. And many people see kind of, overlap between Dumo and Ambedkar, which I find hilarious, even though Ambedkar talks about hierarchy, but Ambedkar is very different. Will you say something on that?
Yeah, you see, first of all, Ambedkar on caste, when we talked about the, let's say, annihilation of caste, in that he says it very clearly that the caste and village, that relationship is what has really brought down Indian society, in his view. And you cannot fight caste in bits and pieces. It has to be fought in totalities. You can't say I'm anti-Brahmin. So, for example, the anti-Brahmin movements everywhere. We're not anti-caste movements. So many of us have been misled into believing that anti-Brahmin movement is an anti-caste movement.
Oh my God. Guys, those who are listening intently, are you all noticing how many significant overlaps our views have? Actually, it's kind of pointless to say that we are kind of stumbling upon this agreement. No, it's not that. I'm getting these things from reading people or talking to people whose heroes are these people anyway. So yes, our views are themselves sort of the intellectual descendants of the views of these guys. So yeah, but this is so fascinating stuff, because we have to say these things from our channel with sociologists who have to come anonymously on our podcast, or I say with some fear every now and then. I'll have to debate commies, my friends some of my real life friends who listen to my videos, or even right wingers who disagree with us. But now look at the point he's making. Okay, yes, there were anti-Brahmin movements everywhere, but they were not necessarily anti-caste movements. And quote unquote, he says, like we have been led to believe. He's unmasking some core agenda points of theirs, of that Dumontian side.
And anti-Brahmin. So, for example, the anti-Brahmin movements everywhere. We're not anti-caste movements. So many of us have been misled into believing
Have been misled to
anti-Brahmin
believing it.
movement is an anti-caste movement. As people today believe that the OBC movement is against caste, which is not true. Anti-caste is different from being anti this caste, anti that caste.
Annihilation becomes very critical, very sensitive.
So this is one point out there. The other point is not only annihilation but elsewhere as well, including this book, which is, and of course comes up during the constitution debates. Ambedkar writing about fraternity.
Yeah.
And he constantly, I think he's one of the few authors that I can think of who's written about fraternity with such stridency.
I would put Savarkar in that list as well, but I am also very much a fan of Ambedkar making this point vehemently about fraternity, and him making sure people get it into their heads by saying that yes, equality and liberty everyone wants. Where the fuck is the conversation about fraternity? And with fraternity, he kind of calls for Hindu unity because he says, look at the unity among Muslims. Why can't Hindus have that unity? That is what Savarkar also ends up saying, with, of course, other words, other lexicon, and other intentions, even maybe. Although Pakistan or partition of India had intentions way darker than Savarkar. So, yes, let's say Savarkar and Ambedkar were big on fraternity.
that I can think of who's written about fraternity with such stridency. Others have mentioned fraternity, just equality, liberty, fraternity, as if all come to a package. But Ambedkar took fraternity out of this package and gave it special importance. And for which reason he said, that as long as you have caste, you will not have fraternity. And fraternity for him was the essence of democracy.
That is what Savarkar was also saying, which is why he said, don't even recognize castes from the POV of the state. Now, Auditor is saying, I think we are so blue-walled by academics that them just stating the obvious and saying just 5% of the stuff we know as facts is giving us orgasms. Your statement is almost perfect, except you'd have to add something in the middle of your first sentence, in the first half of your sentence. I think we are so blue-balled by academics in the last 2 or 3 decades that now these people are coming across as stating heroic things. बीच में कुछ घपला हो गया अचानक से.
And in the entire constitutional debate, which Ambedkar was, of course, very much a part of, you will find time and time again he talks about fraternity. And the problem that I have with political theoreticians is when they talk of Ambedkar, they don't talk about this aspect as much as they should. I think Ambedkar's understanding of caste or attack on caste can be understood in totality if seen with fraternity.
Nice.
They shouldn't be seen separately. And many followers of Ambedkar today, I think, need to pay attention to this aspect.
Oh,
That
my
perhaps
God.
takes us to the next.
Many followers of Ambedkar need to pay attention to Ambedkar. Aren't we saying that all day? Holy shit.
Theme on which again you have written quite a lot. And for me, perhaps also for you, Ambedkar is primarily a theoretician of citizenship and of democracy in some sense, Indian context. And that's where he's looking at caste in opposition to citizenship, right? So
fraternity was the point.
Fraternity was a point, but beyond fraternity, for example, as you were talking about earlier in relation to Shiv Sena work, there's also a question of nation state, where the moment you have to begin to imagine nation state, the grammar of relationships has to be visualized very differently. Yeah. And I think Ambedkar perhaps is doing it very effectively.
रुको, दिया ने यहाँ पे कॉन्स्पिरेसी थ्योरी उछाला है, तो मैं इसमें मेरा स्टांस क्लियर करता हूँ कि बिकॉज आई हैव अ काउंटर कॉन्स्पिरेसी थ्योरी टू हर कॉन्स्पिरेसी थ्योरी. I believe, Diya, rarely are people and, let's say, egoistical, self-respecting academics, often there is no difference between an egomaniac and a self-respecting person, especially when it comes to academics and Brahmins, therefore. So, most of them cannot be co-opted with money, okay? Like the current people in power probably wish were the case. So, some people can definitely be co-opted. Some people we are seeing in the modern times getting co-opted. Mostly what happens is kings and the state, prime ministers, presidents will simply pick and choose the academics who have the legit credentials, but the ones who agree with them most, and they will make their path smoother or put them in nice academic positions or fund them indirectly, etc. Which is not something BJP has done, obviously. So therefore, where I'm disagreeing with you is that right now Surinder Jodhka and Dipankar Gupta, they have not woken up one fine morning just to oppose BJP. They had these views anyway. They stumbled upon these views anyway. Congress, I think, found a use for them because my conspiracy theory is Congress was trying to move away from caste politics. But then wokeism, identity politics, cultural Marxism becomes popular in a certain way in the US. And post 1991, everyone decides we have to copy the US. So at that very opportune moment, when our commies and social scientists were deciding that they are going to copy the West, BJP comes to power and are hard on caste politics way more than Congress. So Congress has to pay caste politics even harder than BJP. So they again tie up, or let's say encourage, nurture those social scientists whom they did not want for a while, who were opposed to the views like views like that of Andre Beti, Surinder, Jodhka, Dipankar, Gupta. But now they join hands with them because they have to oppose BJP, because for some reason they believe that they cannot oppose BJP from the right of BJP. They have to oppose BJP from the left of BJP, but BJP has left no room in the left of them. There's practically no room today left in the left side of the political spectrum on any issue. But since Congress wants to counter BJP, they are encouraging and nurturing those social scientists who again believe in the Dumontian view, because that goes very well hand in hand with America-like identity politics discourse. So now, then people like Surinder, Jodhka, Dipankar, Gupta are kind of politically homeless today. And so, them being so senior, they can openly say things which we say in a quiet voice from our channel. So look at this very interesting then alliances being built up. Let's begin with Dumo's intellectual ancestors. They decide it's Brahminism everywhere, Brahmin deep state, okay? Dumo writes Homo Hierarchicus in 1966. So up till 66 that goes on, let's say. Then Srinivas comes in, Congress is in power, Andre Beti come in, Dipankar Gupta, Surinder Jodhka, Sumit Guha, they happen. All these people are saying, yes, casteism exists everywhere in some way, form or the other. Congress is trying to get the benefit of that because they don't want to hear criticisms for not being able to solve casteism. They're trying to move away from it. They're trying to do neoliberal things. So they are encouraging these sociologists who say these things. Irfan Habib is writing a paper in 1997 saying the most incredible anti-mainstream caste narratives ever. Then BJP outlefts, outcast politics says Congress. So BJP doesn't want anything to do with caste discourse and stuff anyway. They just believe, paisa de diya ho gaya. Which is kind of what people like Tel Tumre would also believe. They will not acknowledge that BJP actually does it, but they exactly want what BJP is doing. Amartya Sen once has always recommended policies that BJP is exactly doing. But anyway, give everything for free. After that, do reservation. Then everything will be solved. So then Congress tries to get back into the game by fighting BJP on casteism, by declaring these very, very pro-reservation guys, pushing them further towards reservation and further towards pro-caste politics. And they dig up all the sociologists again who are opposed to the views of Dipankar Gupta, Surinder Jodhka. So now we who are on the libertarian side of the 2.0 of Indian right-wing movements are finding agreement with a former Congressy let's say formerly close to Congress kind of a group of academics. That's where we are now. It's so convoluted.
Recognizing the problems of Indian society. Nehru is also doing it, but Nehru is not engaging with those kinds of problems as effectively as Ambedkar is doing.
See, where Ambedkar Nehru made a team was that, and not only that, even the early national movement, though Ambedkar wasn't very happy in the 1930s, but you can tell by 1950s, there's some kind of a symbiosis in the sense that they realize that nationalism is not good enough. You must have democracy. See, if you look at nationalism in other parts of the colonial world, they fought against outsiders, colonial powers, but they didn't think of internal reform, which is why many of these anti-colonial movements ended up in dictatorships and worse. India is probably the only country where nationalism was not the most important thing. What was important was, which I mentioned Nehru, mentioned Ambedkar in the constitution, that this constitution is not worth the candle if we don't have democracy. And that, I think, was a very big thing. And when you trace it back, you'll find it in Ambedkar's works. Even when you're talking about caste, there's a glimmer of it. annihilation a lot more. And in areas where he's talking about citizenship directly, you'll find that it is not just nationalism that is important. Nationalism can be a problem unless it is paired with democracy, which is why you'll find this disjunction between Ambedkar and many others.
Yeah.
You know, and especially if you look at Indian theories of nation state, why is this so advanced? It's advanced because they didn't rest with the nation. The moment India became a nation, they said, let's have a state, let's have a democracy. The moment it became. So Nehru's twisted destiny, unfinished work. What was unfinished is the constitution is happening, it's going to come very soon, just watch out. You know, it'll be in the theaters soon, in a cinema near you. It'll be the constitution will come up. Pay attention. So this is the contribution, I think, of the two together.
So you've also used the word modernity in your work quite frequently, and you continue to do that in the book that is likely to come out soon. There also you engage with question of society as kind of modern kind of collective formation, which is in some sense an old tradition also in sociology. But in context of what you just said about citizenship and democracy, need to be the primary structures of, in some sense, political community making, then the idea of nationalism or nation state.
Yeah.
And there is also a kind of idea of modernity, which sometimes comes in conflict with the idea of democracy. And people have actually counterposed the two. That you need to give priority to democracy over modernity, because modernity then makes us preoccupied with some kind of Western cultural modes of social life, which may not really be required for democracy to function in a different context.
Yeah, which is why when I wrote about modernity, the first distinction I made was that you must not confuse modernity with contemporaneity.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is happening today doesn't mean it's modern.
Yeah.
And the point you made is valid, because what has happened in the past is, even today it happens, that modernity is usually identified with things. So-and-so is driving a car. So-and-so is wearing Western clothes. So-and-so, it lives in this fashion. So that becomes modernity. But like all sociological concepts, every one you can think of, I don't know of a single sociological concept which talks about things. Real concepts talk about relations between people. So modernity is about relations between people. So if I were to go to Bengal, for example, I'd say Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who dressed like a Bengali, he was a very modern person. He was more modern than many contemporary people because the way he thought, the relations between people. This is why I use a term borrowed from an Iranian scholar called Westoxication. That when you think about modernity as going to bars, drinking, or driving fast cars, or going.
Okay, this absolutely sounds like decolonial literature. This is pretty much the crux of India that is Bharat by J.S. Deepak.
Abroad, he used the word Westoxication, that you've been intoxicated by the West. But that's not modernity. Which is why when Srinivas was given this choice in his mind, whether to write a modernity or westernization, he said to himself very perceptively, he said that India is not ready for modernity. It's ready for westernization. Because modernity has a psychological component.
Holy shit. Fuck. That is such an accurate and profound thing to say. India is not ready for modernity, it's ready for westernization.
Ready for. So you will find in his book, he doesn't really talk about modernity as much, though mentions it in the beginning. And he stops there because he knows India is westernized but not modernized. And today the mistake we make is this. This mistake we'll find in Eisenstadt, for example, who was very popular in the West. And in India, because it's popular in the West, people in India begin to worship him, this particular point of view. He talks about multiple modernity. So what happens in multiple modernity? Any terrorist anywhere who's using a machine gun or modern weapons becomes modern. But it's not about relations between people. That is the most important thing. You don't have to be driving a fast car to be modern. It's how do you look at other people? To be able to be intersubjective, to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, that is the sign of modernity. It doesn't happen easily. It is not a finished job. It's constantly evolving, just like democracy is. Democracy and modernity go together. Because one side is democracy, the other side is modernity, and none of them are complete. They're all work in progress. So anybody who says my democracy is complete is actually being very undemocratic. Because remember, in the mid-19th century, even 20th century, we didn't imagine that migrants and women would have equal rights. Now they have. So democracy evolved. Today we give equal rights to.
Yeah, Stickle Mako. Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes is going a little too far, because there can be many instances of that and many side effects of that as well.
Gays and lesbians also. Democracy has evolved. So this evolution means that something else is going to happen as well. We don't know today. Something else might happen tomorrow. Be ready for it. Don't say my democracy is done. And those who believe that my democracy is done, my modernity is done, they are, I think, being backward.
But there's also, I think, what one would call as multiple modes of traveling on the direction of modernity, or multiple paths to modernity.
Yes.
For example, British modernity.
Yes, I agree with you.
Is different from German.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
It's just like this.
Yeah.
There are many ways to be capitalist.
Yeah, precisely.
But there's something called capitalism.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what I'm saying is, there's something called modernity.
Yeah.
Don't dilute that. Once you know what modernity is, then you see how are the different ways people became modern.
Yeah.
Some more modern, some less modern, some pushing forward, not getting there. It's like democracy. There's something called democracy, and we are not all the same. Different kinds of democracy. But when people talk of multiple modernities, they take it with the analytical aspect.
They dehistoricize it.
And
What we need to do is to
Yeah.
historicize
precisely.
diversities of ways of becoming, or
Precisely.
paths of paths to
We
more
all
modernity.
accept the mini capitalism,
Yeah.
but there's a capitalism
Precisely,
first. So that is the point which I think them should
It's
emphasize.
also kind of question of abstraction, that you're trying to give name to something so that you can compare your society with other
Exactly.
societies. And we are living in kind of common world.
Yeah, and
And
then
that
see
is-
the whole thing as a dialectic,
Precisely.
not something that's static.
Yeah.
And which is why it should all sociological concepts, I would like to emphasize, should never be about things.
Yeah.
For example, kinship is not about father, mother, sister, brother. It's about relationship. Then marriage is not about dowry. It's about relationships. So these aspects are forgotten very often. And modernity particularly, I find that people talk about things and not about relations.
Yeah, coming to
Great stuff.
language in a kind of very general sense of the term, you have been, in some sense, one of our leading sociologists who is popularly known. And you are popularly known because you had the courage to go out and talk to common public through writing newspapers, appearing on television cameras, which can be quite risky. It's not always very easy, because you also then make available to general public who are not actually understanding what you're trying to say. How was that journey? How did that journey start? Can you say? And then I'll have some specific questions.
Well, that journey started in the 1990s, I think, mid-1990s, when television became. And to a large extent, I was also influenced by Professor Bete. He used to write for the Times of India. And his style of writing was to make good sociology accessible to people. So I was challenged by that notion. So I began to think in terms of how can I bring in important sociological nuggets in such a way that it is appreciated by people and you don't dilute it. No point in diluting sociology. So writing for the press and appearing on television was a different kind of challenge, because you have to talk about big things in a way that can be easily understood without minimizing their impact. And that was not easy. But I must say this, that once I started writing for the press, I think my academic writing improved. I'm not sure, but I think it improved, because I began to be more self-critical. Whenever I used a concept, I asked myself, what does it mean to the ordinary person when I use this term? So I never sacrificed the concept, but I put it in a context, which I think I tried my best to make it comprehensible to to an intelligent person.
Do you like the idea of being a public intellectual?
I don't like the idea of being a public intellectual, because I think that combination is not a good one.
Why?
Public intellectuals are people who seek attention, who say things which are startling, who want to be in the eye of people, who want to be controversial figures. I don't like that position. So when people say, public intellectuals, are you sure? I don't think I like that. because I know who the public intellectuals are. You and I both know some very important public intellectuals who come on television, newspapers, and they are not very sincere to their task. They
Oh,
often say things or do things to draw attention. And I
ah, I think we can rightly guess he's talking about those sociologists, social scientists, academics who are public intellectuals and who will blame casteism entirely on Hinduism and India distinctly, and and operate and think like cultural essentialists.
I know some people who have written on Ambedkar or written on many others, and I know that they haven't read those books properly.
Fuck.
So they pick up something and they write about it and they make a splash.
Holy shit.
Because public intellectuals are making a splash is so common that the word public intellectual doesn't have a good odor about it.
So one should not compromise on the professional rigor
Exactly.
in order to communicate with the larger public. And this brings
Nice,
me to another
nice.
category which kind of became popular with Michael Borowiez. I remember he had come here and we had some discussion on this, is the idea of public sociology. So just give us, I know what is your take. My take is also the same, but in a sense,
I used to date a sociologist at one point, up until a few months back, and she was very happy with my channel, even though she was a leftist. She was very happy with what I do from my channel because this is public sociology, as public as it gets. We are bringing concepts of I would like to call it social science TMZ. We are social science paparazzi, but that is public sociology. We are bringing out, we are trying to popularize and disseminate these ideas.
how would you respond to the idea of public sociology?
You see, what public sociology intends to do is quite a laudable idea. That is to make sociology accessible to people. It should not be using just esoteric technology, terminology, and so forth. But the downside of it, this is very good. The downside of it is that you tend to dilute the sociological aspects.
Very true. And since I don't want to dilute the sociological aspects, therefore my live streams are not never lesser than 2.5, 3 hours long, because then I would have to dilute if I wanted to go beneath those timelines. Ashkasim is saying you have done many adventures, I see. Yes. And okay, I won't get into that right now.
Which take a little thinking, not too much, a little thinking, and people are often turned off by that.
Yeah.
And very often that little thinking is not in line with the popular assumption people have.
Yeah.
For example, people have popular assumption regarding, let's say, patriarchy. And when you do this public sociology, you'll find that, patriarchy, as people understand, and what you think it is, are not the same. So the public sociology, I think, runs up against this issue. And I don't know if it has solved it or not.
Have we come up with a model to solve it then?
I don't think it has. I think that matter still remains.
Oh, sir, please follow our channel. I really need to contact these professors now for a podcast.
The term public sociology, when I think about it today, after about 10 years or so, I think is a bad term. I don't think it should be used.
Oh, shit.
Public sociology like using
Nice.
public facilities. You go there, you use it and come away. You have a tissue paper, you throw it out.
Right.
I think public sociology, the idea is.
See, he has the same things to say for sociology as any Brahmin or Shastra expert would have to say about the Shastras. That what's this scholarly perspective and stuff? You are being a tourist. He's just wanting you to be a proper sociologist and then get into sociology and don't come out of sociology. Treat it with the necessary gravity it deserves. This is very, very interesting stuff. Retro is saying, I wonder what it was like to date a sociologist. Did you two discuss sociology during Pillow Talk? The problem was that relationship got fucked because that's what I entirely want to do and discuss. I loved discussing sociology with her. Yeah, so pretty much all day long it was sociology discussions and sociological analysis of other stuff in life, sports, friendships, parents, everywhere we only did analytical talks regarding sociology, because you can't have those conversations with other people. No, how many people will you find with whom you can discuss, and how many people will even want to discuss that? So I wanted to discuss. She was happy to oblige, but at least the majority of the relationship was having fun discussing sociology. Lol. That's why it got fucked.
That you must communicate sociology to as many people as you can,
Hmm.
which is a good thing. But you don't need to use the word public sociology. That is what sociology should do. Academic sociology should do that. Why
Right.
shouldn't it do that?
Yeah.
You know, it should.
There's also the idea of what one should say, critical thinking.
Yeah.
And critical thinking is something that sociologists have thought about quite a lot. And say, for example, when economists are talking about data, they are just telling them what is happening and what are the different ways. And I think sociologists, in some sense, have a much bigger task of assessing those processes in terms of, for example, values of citizenship or modernity, or the kind of relational systems which would produce violence. So,
when you talk about data, for example, this is the problem, that sociology is probably the discipline, maybe the only social science discipline, where you are supposed to make your own data. You can't take somebody else's data and use it. By and large, not everybody, but by and large, economists use data that somebody else has produced. Sociology, you always produce your own data. And there's one example which I'm very fond of giving, so I'll give it again, state it again. That is, if I'm a census enumerator, I come and ask you, what are you? You say I'm a farmer. And then after some time, I come back and ask you, what did you do today? And you didn't farm, you did a number of other things. And then I say, well, you told me you're a farmer. And you say, yeah, I'm a farmer, but I spent today looking for a job as a carpenter. So the point really is that you said you were a farmer because that's a job you really know, but your land is so small, you can't farm, you do other things. But if I were a census enumerator, I would have said you're a farmer. I'm not lying, you're not lying, but the person reading it is being misled. This is why data by itself is very tricky. And I think sociologists score over many other disciplines because you make your own data, so you are responsible for it.
So, as we said in the beginning, so Dipankar Gupta, particularly after he left JNU.
So you see, that's a double-edged sword, and therefore we will have insanely incompetent, dishonest sociologists. On the other hand, we will have people like Dr. Dipankar Gupta.
He also digressed into writing proper fiction.
By the way, he's saying that his idol kind of is Andre Beti, right? And we have discussed Andre Beti from this channel on a live stream as well. He's practically of these views only. He in fact went a step further and said reservations don't work.
Novels. And those novels, if you type Dipankar Gupta on Amazon, they will not pop up. But the name that he uses also has Dipankar Gupta. It's actually D.G. Ray, R.A.E., right? Yeah. So if you enter D.G. Ray, you would see his fictional books. But my question to you is...
Yeah. He also writes fictional novels and stuff. He's a fiction author as well. Secretly, under a pen name.
The question is obviously asked by many people, why do you move to fiction? But my question is also that were you exhausted with sociology that kind of inspired you to do other things?
Well, no, I don't think I was exhausted by sociology, but I really felt that, I needed something different to keep my spirits alive during the COVID years.
Okay.
The COVID years were very terrible, as you know. It just happened the other day, but we tend to forget it. But those were very, very difficult years, and we were just boxed in our home. And I thought of the world outside, and it was there, but it was not for me. So imagination was very useful. And before that, I was not keeping very well. So all that put together, this gave me an outlet. And I enjoyed this outlet because unlike sociology, where I'm constantly told to mind my manners and write the proper way, there's a style of doing things. You mustn't, you must have footnotes and corrections, data, support structures. In fiction, you're left to yourself. And if you're in a cooped up at home and fearful of the world outside, fiction was a wonderful release. And what I added to that release was I didn't write about India. I wrote about the West. All my books are based in America, really. And that made it even more pleasant for me because I could really dream, away from the reality, the grim reality around me. And now it has become something that I really begun to enjoy. And I hope a time will come when I can return to it. But let's see.
Long time back, Mr. Dipankar Gupta told me that he's going to now not write for sociology, and this is his last book, this is his last article. Every time he told me, I laughed at it, and he knew I didn't believe him. And after that, I think he's published at least 5 books in sociology. So he remains very enthusiastic about sociology, and I've seen him in the last 2-3 weeks. We have been interacting again because he has been in Delhi, and you have given a lecture here, which is also there online available. So you're not somebody who is in any way distanced or detached from the discipline of sociology or social sciences or academic life. And that is something which is my last question at some level, that if one was to think of contemporary times, we have 2-3 things which are like majorly already influencing us, having consequences, significant consequences. One is, I think your classical thesis about sociology and democracy go together. Non-democratic regimes don't need sociology, and sociology can't flourish if there is no democracy, which I think makes a lot of sense. And if one was to ask...
That's an interesting view. So democracy can't survive without sociology. Sociology can't survive without democracy. So fucking accurately put.
The contemporary time where the world is, through populism, certain kind of authoritarianism is in some sense everywhere. So that is one context. And on the other hand, you have this hyper technology, artificial intelligence, which in some sense works very well for the state, because you can try to find technical answers or technological solutions to social problems or social questions. So how do you see the future of sociology for the coming generation of scholars who are coming into the field, or for the larger kind of society as it is lived?
Well, I hope you don't find me being too simplistic here, but that is the way I feel. And if it seems naive to some, I can't help it. But I strongly believe that sociology cannot survive if there is no democracy. The simple reason is that society that we live in today gets its vibrancy from the democratic principles where everybody is conceptually equal. And then you ask your question, if we are conceptually equal, why aren't we equal? It is this gap between promise and actuality that sociology bridges all the time.
I am with him even up until this point, that yes, on paper you have equality. Yes, even then there is no real equality. The disagreements, I think, come, I don't know exactly what his solutions are. My disagreement with at least people like Tel Tumbre, I keep forgetting his first name, but anyway, and then Mr. Surinder Jodhka here as well, on the solutions. Reservations are not the solution to any of these problems. Problem diagnosis, I agree. Reality of the problem, nature of the problem, yes. The law is conceptually equal, equality of opportunity, yes, I agree. Do you solve it? Do you even try to solve it? What do you do to solve it? That's where we end up disagreeing with these people. I don't know what exactly Surinder Jodhka's, Dr. Dipankar Gupta's solutions are.
Very openly. Economics does it, political science does it. Political science today is really political sociology. You have to think of it.
Or theory, philosophy.
Yeah, but real political science, as I see it anyway, is mostly political sociology. So this gap is what they're working on. If you don't have democracy as a benchmark, then what are you going to put your empirical data against? There's nothing. Now, democracy is therefore very important. But unfortunately, democracy is a very delicate plant. It dies very easily if you don't look after it. It's something like monarchy, feudalism. They're like sturdy oak. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
And they're not so pretty. But democracy is a very delicate, beautiful flower. But because it's delicate and beautiful, it can also be destroyed easily. And the destruction of democracy, we can see it around us. And I sometimes feel that academics should really write about how important democracy is for everyday life, not just politics. And here again,
and hence Professor Babones, another comparative sociologist, has written a book on democracy, in fact, of which we will read a few lines, from some beautiful paragraphs from the preface after this interview is over.
I come to Ambedkar, who said that democracy is not simply about politics, it's about how people relate to each other. He wrote this again, annihilation. So don't say democracy is about politics and representative government and voting and so on and so forth. It's about how we relate and how we communicate to each other. That's democracy. It takes us to John Rawls and everybody else. This aspect of democracy. So I feel that sociology and all of social science, but sociology in the forefront, is indebted to democracy. And because democracy is so difficult, every time something goes wrong, we should sound the warning bell, not in a partisan fashion, but in an academic sense.
Srikal Mako, he would probably say that they didn't have universal adult franchise. It was still a select few having some counsel and therefore having their voices made heard to the head of the state.
And once it goes wrong, it's very hard to get it right. You can't get a beautiful flower that's withered away back to life again. It's very hard. And that's my view on democracy and sociology. And the two to go together, and the combination is one which is a very delicate negotiation. If democracy had been easy, it would have been a different thing. But democracy is not easy.
What is your take on technology, artificial intelligence?
I think artificial intelligence is very good, provided we use it to augment knowledge, not to replace. Now, you will see artificial intelligence, I've also written on this. They use the word, let's say, for example, they use the word chat GPT. Now, what is the meaning of G? G means generative. Now, if I look at chat GPT, G is not there. It is something else. It's algorithmic. What is generative? Generative is what, for example, Levi-Strauss and de Saussure has talked about. That on minimal information, I can spin a whole theory. What does ChatGPT do? It needs maximum information to say something. So what linguistics taught us is that a child can say unique sentences by knowing very little grammar, because that tells the child how to speak, and the sentence is understood by everybody, and some sentences may be quite unique. With ChatGPT, to say one sentence is unique or whatever, they need loads of information. So generative grammar only functions when on information paucity. Information paucity creates knowledge. Loads of information doesn't create knowledge, it produces knowledge. They're two different things altogether. So algorithmic knowledge is artificial intelligence. Generative knowledge is E is equal to MC squared. No ChatGPT will come up with this. But once you feed it to ChatGPT, it can do many things. So if you want to look at generative knowledge coming up, you want to look at generative knowledge, you can't depend on artificial intelligence. You can use it to augment knowledge. So you can never replace it. The moment we think you can replace it, I think we've given up the ghost. We're thrown in the towel, and we don't deserve to be intellectuals at all. But you using it, yes, do use it. Use it to advantage, but remember it is algorithmic. Generative is in your head. That cannot be replaced. And generative grammar is different from what ChatGPT does, and I'm surprised that people have not seen this difference. One needs paucity of information and can make terrific things, and one needs loads of information. You might remember Levi-Strauss's Science of the Concrete, where he says that there's one kind of knowledge which the scientist does, which is the scientist leaps from empirical reality to structure, complete leap. And the bricklayer or the handyman goes from structure to structure to structure. Whereas the scientist takes a leap. That leap is only possible with the brain.
So as long as human creativity survives, it would also keep producing new kind of relationships. And that's what sociologists study. And those relationships will have to be empirically observed and then maybe fed into technology, and they can do whatever they want to do with it. Any other questions, Srideep? Do you have anything in mind? I think with this, we wind up our discussion. Thank you so much, Mr. Dipankar.
Thank you.
And this has been a kind of wonderful treat for me also. I mean, I've learned so much.
I'm so happy
that session today.
The questions you asked are very important and useful and made me think.
Anything else that you want to add in the next 2 minutes?
No, not really. I just want to say that when you talk about the future of sociology, it's difficult to say today what will be the future tomorrow. The only thing that you can say is don't be tempted by easy, quick solutions. ChatGPT, artificial intelligence are very good, but use them. Don't be used by them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we will check out some fascinating portions from the preface of Dharma and Democracy, Professor Babones's book. Now, we'll have another 10-15 minutes to go. But I need to make one appeal. Consider, please, donating to that UPI or the bank details given in the description box because of my legal troubles, legal fees. I am in debt 1.3 lakhs already, and I'll need some more. I'll need to take on more debt, I think, because I don't expect crowdfunding to pick up the duties anymore, because so many of you all have donated a lot already. But whatever you can, that would help. Because where are my cases right now? How much can I divulge? Let's see. So the cases against me, that's getting the motion to quash that has been filed in the Calcutta High Court, and I am going to be going to be carrying on the cases against my perpetrators as well, and we are doing it through the lower courts. So uh, I've appeared in 2 hearings already. Yeah, next day's hearing will be, now the police has taken evidence from me directly. They'll begin their investigations next day. I think the hearing will be about confirming whether the evidence I've submitted is all correct or not. And on that hearing or the hearing after that, they'll declare, okay, start whatever arrests is necessary, etc. So for those hearings and my quashing hearings, etc., I'll be in need of money for the foreseeable future. Lol. Okay. Now this book is so awesome. Let me just read out to you some absolutely brilliant portions from Professor Babones's research. I really like this portion. The literary works of India's independence leaders are suffused with the idea of duty to the nation, although it was not always clear just what nation people owed their duty to. Many thought that democracy meant duty to the whole world. The Indian nationalist Sri Aurobindo, citing Mazzini, wrote in 1908 that the weakness of European democracy and the source of its failure was that it took as its motive the rights of man and not the dharma of humanity. Others were clearer that they held a duty specifically to the Indian nation. When the independence leader Bal Gangadhar Tilak departed for London in 1918 to press for Indian home rule, he described it as a mission of dharma on behalf of the quote unquote fortunes of the whole of India. Of course, the leaders of national liberation movements throughout the Third World professed duties toward the nations they aspired to lead. Mao Zedong even had, quote unquote, served the people inscribed over the entrance to the Communist Party compound in Tiananmen Square. But India's independence leaders were of a different mold and of a different mind. With the possible exception of Nehru, they were more concerned to ensure the success of the independence struggle than that of their own careers. Gandhi may be the only quote unquote father of a non Western nation who clearly had no ambition to lead it. His dharma was to inspire, not to govern, and he seems to have recognized that. He and the other founders of India wrote extensively about their aspirations for the Indian nation and fully expected to be held accountable by history for living up to their ideals. We don't have to tease implicit political philosophies out of their speeches and letters. Why? India's founders left us a veritable library full of books laying out their visions for the future of their nation and ruminating on the meaning of nationhood itself. The Indian independence literature is the world's most voluminous and arguably its most thoroughly introspective. It is too little read by Indians today. It deserves to be read by the world. In contrast to America's founding fathers, India's independence leaders went far beyond debating the simple mechanics of government. These minutiae do appear in their writings, and much ink and some blood was spilled over issues like reserved parliamentary seats for specific community groups, the degree to which the law should support social reform, and even the extent of the franchise. These were all important questions to be answered in the run up to independence. But the major literary works of India's founding fathers focused on what it meant to be a nation, who was and wasn't an Indian, the meaning of nationhood for India, and the duties of citizens toward the new Indian nation. India's constitution making body, the Constituent Assembly that sat from late 1946 to early 1950, debated such matters as the national flag, the national emblem, national anthem, national song, not the same thing, the national language, and especially what the country should be named. Everyone agreed that India was an old nation, even if no one agreed just what nation it was. This question of colonial India's future national identity had been unsettled by the demand made by many Muslim intellectuals that a separate Muslim majority country should be carved out of British India. The prospective and later the actual partition of British India into the successor states of India and Pakistan loomed large in the writing of India's independence leaders, as did the prospective relations among adherents of different religions in a democratic Hindu majority India. All recognized that independent India would have many Muslim citizens, even if Muslim separatists succeeded in their campaign to create an independent Pakistan. It is an inescapable fact that all of India's most prominent, most literary independence leaders were Hindu. Some Muslim intellectuals remained in India after partition, but they did not enjoy anything like the stature of those who left to form Pakistan. Thus, while British India's Muslim intellectuals were busy developing the theory of Islamic nationhood, the challenge of theorizing a pluralistic Indian nationhood fell almost entirely to Hindus. That's a pretty significant thing to say for a Western sociologist. The nature of nationhood is something most people take for granted today, but it was hotly debated in the first half of the 20th century. The world wars marked the end of the eras of empire, World War I, and colonialism, World War II, and the rise of the nation state. After the Western Allies made national self determination one of the major peace aims of World War I, would be national leaders from Ho Chi Minh to Lawrence of Arabia converged on the Paris Peace Conference to argue for recognition of their would be nations. India was represented by Edwin Montagu, the British Secretary of State for India. India's independence leaders were not present, but they were all very well aware that empires were being broken up. The Russian, Ottoman, and Austro-Hungarian empires were divided into more than a dozen new nations, many of them being recognized as independent states. And although a century later there may be a rough consensus as to which communities constitute quote unquote nations and which do not, there was no such consensus in 1919. British India too was a patchwork of had been and would be nations. British India included at various times a collection of territories that have gone on to become the distinct modern nations of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Burma, Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and Singapore, as well as parts of Malaysia and Yemen. Nepal and Bhutan were British client states that ultimately remained independent. Sikkim was a British client state that did not. Hundreds of quote unquote princely states within what is now modern India were nominally sovereign under British rule, and one, Hyderabad, made a serious bid for independence in 1947, going so far as to appeal to the United Nations Security Council for help. There were also non British colonial enclaves in Goa, the Portuguese, and Pondicherry, French. All of the entities of this now disparate region could have become part of the quote unquote nation of India. The fact that some did and some didn't is an accident of history, not a product of fate. A very interesting thing to say, really. I'll ask him about this sentence when he comes on the podcast as well. The fact that some did and some didn't, that some remained in India and some didn't, is an accident of history, not a product of fate. Thus, it should not be surprising that Indian nationalism had to wrestle with the definition of the nation in a way that Pakistani or indeed Nepali, Burmese, Sri Lankan nationalism never did. Nationalism as an ideology gets short shrift these days, especially among Western intellectuals, but at the time of India's independence struggle, it was all the rage, especially among Western intellectuals. Yeah, these days, especially among Western intellectuals, ideology gets nationalism as an ideology gets the short shrift, but back then it was all the rage, especially among Western intellectuals. So that's a very uh, provocative way of framing a sentence. Even today, the Western political class that disparages nationalism as a primitive survival from an earlier era is nonetheless keen to promote quote unquote nation building in faraway countries that suffer from chronic violence and civil war, or to defend the distinct nationhood of smaller countries against the irredentist claims of the larger neighbors like Ukraine and Russia. India's independence leaders were very aware that they had to define and build a nation before they could liberate it. The nation that nearly all of them sought to build was a multi religious India encompassing today's India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Their Rashtra Dharma was to ensure the emergence of a peaceful, democratic, but most of all united India. In that they failed. India was partitioned at independence and violently so. It is impossible to understand the political fault lines of today's India without realizing that a few months before the declaration of Indian independence on 15th August 1947, it still wasn't clear that British India would be divided into separate Hindu and Muslim majority countries. It wasn't only that the borders were undetermined, the actual decision to partition the country was not announced until 3rd June 1947. But prescient people could see it coming. The prospect of a coming partition on the basis of religion encouraged radicals to expel or murder their neighbors of different faiths in order to ensure a local majority for their own communities. It was thus that the ethnic cleansing of India began a full year earlier, in August 1946. August 1946, he mentions. It continued through the proclamation of the new countries of India and Pakistan and well beyond. At a low level, it continues today. In the Indian Rashtra or nation that we know today is the product of partition. It is not the nation that India's independence leaders fought for or until very late in the day expected to achieve. All analysis of Indian nationhood and thus ultimately or Indian democracy must account for this discrepancy. Listen to this line now. The nation of India's pre 1947 national liberation movement is not the nation of the modern Indian nation state. Nor is the theorization of Pakistani nationhood much clearer. Pakistan was supposedly carved out of British India in 1947 as a homeland for the country's Muslims, but approximately one third of the Muslims of British India remained in independent India. India has thus remained a multi-religious country, in contrast to Pakistan and Bangladesh, which have become more and more uniformly Muslim. India's continuing commitment to religious pluralism thus raises an obvious question. Now, guys, hold your breaths. Get excited. Listen to what question he is about to ask. A white sociologist from the West, a credentialed one, a legit one at that. Listen to what question he is asking. If India was always destined to be an inclusive secular democracy, why was Pakistan created at all? That question lies at the heart of India's democratic dharma. The BJP that has led India's central government since 2014 promotes a vision of India as a single, unified, undifferentiated nation, more a recession than a healing of the scars of partition. Though often portrayed as a reactionary movement, the BJP is in fact a modernizing force in Indian politics, fighting elections on a nationwide basis and seeking supporters across all castes, classes, and even creeds. It is an unabashedly nationalist party dedicated to what it sees as the rejuvenation of the Indian nation. It is also in practice an unabashedly Hindu party, though it resists the label Hindu nationalists that is near universally applied to it by the international press. In a country that is 80% Hindu, the BJP is widely, and it must be said often credibly, accused of treating India as a Hindu Rashtra, that is to say, a specifically Hindu nation. The BJP's party theorists generally characterize their nationalist ideology as inclusive. Many opponents, of course, disagree. Westerners who are neither political scientists nor very familiar with Indian politics might be nonplussed by the assertion that a major Indian political party might think of India as a Hindu nation. After all, the one thing that most Westerners know about India, if they know anything at all, is that India is a Hindu country. Just as the United States is routinely referred to as a Christian country, India is generally thought of as a Hindu country, despite the fact that neither of these countries has an official state religion. The United States wears its Christian founding lightly, notwithstanding occasional disputes over the separation of church and state, the very word church reflecting the fact that Christianity is the default religion. But then, the United States did not fight a civil war on the basis of religion. Sensitivities regarding religion in India cannot be overstated. Americans might celebrate the spectacle of a newly elected politician taking an oath of office on the Bhagavad Gita, but an Indian politician who tried to do the same would be vilified for attempting to undermine India's secular state. There is a fine line between a democratic system that enshrines respect for religious minorities and one that mandates a purely secular state. It is the line between religious toleration and religious pluralism. It is the line that separates liberalism from multiculturalism. The BJP claims to be a liberal political party that preaches religious toleration against a secular intellectual establishment that argues for religious pluralism. Implicit in the BJP's worldview is the idea that every Indian citizen, regardless of religion, owes the same Rashtradharma to the nation, which in India's case happens to be a nation that is overwhelmingly Hindu. The BJP does not maintain that people must be Hindu to be truly Indian, but it does insist that Indians must respect the Hindu character of the Indian nation. It uses Hindu centric rhetoric the way an American conservative might speak of America's Christian heritage or appeal to the country's Judeo Christian values. But although this kind of language might be considered only mildly exclusionary in the United States, many BJP critics consider it deeply offensive in India. The BJP's main political opponent, the Indian National Congress, was once a typical third world national liberation movement. Historically, it attempted to unite all pro independence forces throughout the country under a single political umbrella. In most other post colonial countries, these united front movements evolved into dictatorial family dynasties. That was almost the fate of the INC. Upon independence, the INC leader Jawaharlal Nehru became India's first prime minister and remained in office for nearly 17 years, dying in harness in 1964. After an interlude of only 20 months, he was succeeded in 1966 by his daughter Indira Gandhi. After a decade in power, she engineered a state of emergency, suspended elections, imprisoned her opponents, and ruled by decree for 21 months beginning in June 1975. But Indian democracy held firm, and the INC was swept from power when elections were eventually held in 1977. The INC is still India's second party, still the major national opposition to the BJP, and still run by the Nehru Gandhi family. All told, the Nehru Gandhi family, father, daughter, grandson, governed India for 37 of its first 42 years as an independent country. India's politics have, however, been highly competitive at least since the 1990s, and today's INC is thoroughly committed to genuine multi party democracy. Under its fourth generation of family leadership, it has evolved into a postmodern political party that in many ways seems more at home on social media than in stadium rallies. It retains the socialist predilection for a managed economy that characterized its early years, but has evolved away from their third world communitarianism toward a more individualistic, more Western style understanding of social justice. The INC still presumes to speak for India's political class, but it is no longer politically dominant. It is committed to a what happened? I need to drink some green tea. The INC still presumes to speak for India's political class, but it is no longer politically dominant. It is committed to a pluralistic view of the nation, but it faces the dilemma that its staunch secularism sits awkwardly with the extreme religious conservatism of some of the Muslim communities it purports to defend and aspires to represent. So, Salvatore Babones is on record saying that INC, its staunch secularism, sits awkwardly with the extreme religious conservatism of some of the Muslim communities it aspires to represent. INC aspires to represent some of the extreme religious conservatism of the Muslim communities, of some of the Muslim communities. You have some Mike Tyson lists. Is that so? Is that so? If the BJP and the INC represent, respectively, the modern and postmodern currents of Indian politics, a plethora of regional and caste based parties represent its pre modern back channels. Although it is wrong to paint them with too broad a brush, many of them are typical of the clientelist big man politics that dominate most of the post colonial world. The characteristically Indian form of politics as patronage is the caste based party, though these overlap with other forms of organization and caste loyalty should not be overstated. In addition to caste based parties, India has also has many minority ethno-linguistic parties, a panoply of local family-run parties, and a residual communist party that remains active only in a few scattered states. These regional parties, like the caste-based ones, tend to lack truly national policy programs. Most of the successful non-BJP, non-INC political parties in India center on the larger-than-life personality of one prominent politician. As a result, these parties tend to be unstable and unable to compete on the national stage except in coalition. The pluralistic politics of social justice and personal fulfillment pursued by today's INC would be familiar to Western readers as the politics of the Democratic Party in the United States, Labour in the United Kingdom, or the Social Democrats in Germany. Other Western countries have similar parties. The INC is an avowedly nationalistic party and might not want to be likened to these international peers, but the comparison is clear enough. Today's INC is the party of academics, intellectuals, civil servants, and minorities. It supports quiet diplomacy and human rights. Its leaders get invited to speak at international book festivals. Foreign commentators and Indian intellectuals abroad treat it as the natural party of government. The INC may not be entirely familiar to people in other countries, but it requires no special explanation. And India's dozens of particularistic regional parties, though each difficult for outsiders to penetrate, are not difficult to understand in the aggregate. Every country has single issue parties, just not so many of them as India. The BJP, by contrast, is a purely Indian phenomenon. As an unabashedly nationalist party, it is widely misunderstood and often unthinkingly condemned by foreigners. Its distinctively Indian understanding of nationhood translates poorly into English terminology. Eager to score political points, the BJP's opponents within India actively encourage international misperceptions of the party and its policies. Listen to this once again. Eager to score political points, the BJP's opponents within India actively encourage international misperceptions of the party and its policies. The BJP is routinely characterized as authoritarian, dangerous, extremist, fascist, hateful, majoritarian, racist, undemocratic, and all the rest, with comparisons routinely being drawn between BJP India and Nazi Germany. All of this is pure nonsense. There are supporters of the BJP who jingoistically call for the recognition of India as a Hindu nation, in which people of other faiths should be merely tolerated, not accepted or embraced. There are also equally jingoistic critics of the BJP who claim that the party wants to turn India into a Hindu Pakistan. Neither view accurately reflects a party, its history, its ideology, or its behavior in government, where I would be mostly interested in. The behavior in government is where the meat of the matter lies. Whether or not the BJP's own brand of Dharma democracy offers the best adaptation of liberal democratic values to India's particular circumstances is for Indians to judge. With 180 million members, the BJP is the world's largest political party, and its leader Narendra Modi is arguably the world's most popular politician. Although Modi is often portrayed in the international media as a ruthless oppressor of farmers, of Muslims, of quote unquote lower caste of lower caste Hindus, of the poor, that image is impossible to square with hard data from opinion surveys. It has fallen completely flat at the polls. It may be that Modi is popular because Indians don't actually want a liberal democracy, but there are no serious signs of that. The counterintuitive conclusion of this book is that Indians' sense of Rashtra Dharma has made the country more supportive of its liberal institutions and consequently more tolerant of all of its citizens. Duty based democracy is a model that works for India. It might be a model worth trying elsewhere too. The BJP certainly did not set out to make India a more liberal nation, but it has succeeded in doing so. That conclusion might shock old India hands, but it should come as no surprise to students of history. After all, the single most powerful law of historical development is the law of unintended consequences. The purpose, one might say, the dharma of this book, wow, is to offer Western readers a dispassionate account of the operation of Indian democracy, which is the kind of non-fiction I like, the dispassionate ones. मैनिफेस्टो बहुत पढ़ लिया, अब और पसंद नहीं आता है. It analyzes Indian democracy from both a comparative perspective, benchmarking India against other well established democracies, and an historical perspective, benchmarking today's BJP run India against prior INC governments. Personally, I am a non religious American sociologist living and working in Sydney, Australia. I have no personal connection to India, the Hindu faith, or the BJP, and I have no access to grind. Others, so a modern day Max Weber, if you will. Others may seek to use my words for their own purposes, but my purpose in writing them is simple. I believe that Indian democracy is an extraordinary success story, and I want to tell it. If I were Indian, I would be very proud of my country's democracy. Not being Indian, I am content to lay out the facts, offer my analysis, and hope that my readers find themselves better informed at the end of the book than they were at the beginning. The study of modern India is extraordinarily politicized. I am a comparative social scientist with deep expertise in the quantitative analysis of country indicators. But I am not an expert of India as such. I'm not an expert on India as such. In researching this book, I quickly discovered that most of the established experts on India are, frankly, unreliable. Most experts on India are unreliable, according to Professor Babonas. With only a few exceptions, most books on Indian democracy, whether written by Indians or foreigners, are written with the obvious intention of boosting one side in Indian politics while demonizing the other. The scholarly literature is rife with hagiography, selective amnesia, and outright historical facts, misrepresentations of historical facts. Thus, instead of relying on historians for the main facts to support my analysis, as a social scientist usually would, I generally had to read the primary sources for myself. This was immensely time consuming, but also immensely rewarding, and thank God he did that, which is why this is such a juicy and fruitful read. I learned an enormous amount from all this detailed intellectual spade work, and I loved learning it. And I loved learning it. As an outsider to Indian studies who has taken a strictly empirical approach to the study of Indian democracy, I have been greatly aided by the fact that nearly all of the relevant sources are in English. Anyone who wants to obtain a deep understanding of Indian culture must master many languages: Hindi as a lingua franca, Sanskrit as the language of classical learning, Urdu as the language of independence era Muslim intellectuals, and a dozen or more regional tongues. But the language of academic discourse, political journalism, and the social sciences in India is English. The dominance of English is highly controversial in India, but for me it was obviously very convenient. Now listen to this line, guys. What a beautiful book. Nonetheless, as a comparative social scientist, I have listened to this point, guys. This is very, very important. An insane criticism he makes of people of his ilk only. Okay, listen to this. Nonetheless, as a comparative social scientist, I have published on China extensively, Eastern Europe, Latin America, without colleagues ever raising the objection that I did not speak the relevant languages. Western scholars of India, however, have objected so vehemently to my trespassing on their turf as to put my name on online watch lists. Yeah, because his name is on the Hindutva Watch website. And write to my university demanding that I be fired. That may sound crazy, but it is true. Can you believe this? We can, of course, believe this is happening, but even he having to say this in his book is pretty significant. That I'm writing on China, Latin America, Eastern Europe without knowing their languages. No one is batting an eyelid. I'm writing on India, and people are saying, "Oh, you don't know Hindi. How can you even report good things about India?" But of course, if you did not know Hindi, Sanskrit, and wrote bad things about India, no one would say those things to you. Neon, हमारा cute बच्चा Neon is saying, "What? Who did this? कौन किया ऐसा? बुला उसको." Why does academic man come to our channel anonymously? Those same kinds of people. Nonetheless, as a comparative social scientist, I have published on China extensively, Eastern Europe, and Latin America without colleagues ever raising the objection that I did not speak the relevant languages. Western scholars of India, however, have objected so vehemently to my trespassing on their turf. उसके एक्सक्लूसिव ग्रुप्स में उनके कंजम्पशन पैटर्न में सल्वाटोर बेबोनेस का है घुस गया, जो कि इंडिया को अच्छा बोलता है भोसरी के, वो कैसे आ गया हमारे ग्रुप में? As to put my name on online watch lists and write to my university demanding that I be fired. That may sound crazy, but it is true. Yes. You can write good things about India. And if you don't know regional languages, you of course fail to understand India truly. But if you write bad things about India and did not know any Indian languages, then of course you needn't have learned Indian languages. Who cares? You just have to look data, and you found in data that India sucks. Okay. Thus, I would like to acknowledge at the beginning that although 5 years of continuous research have given me some expertise on Indian democracy, I am not an expert on Indian culture or religion. This book presents the facts on Indian democracy as seen from the perspective of a skeptical, quantitative, and comparative sociologist who came to the subject with an interest in democracy, not initially at least with any particular interest in India itself. After 5 years of study, I have come to have strong opinions about the history and trajectory of Indian democracy. But I started with no opinions at all. I set out on this project only with curiosity. I'm getting so much Max Weber vibes, no? Aren't you all getting too? I started with no opinions at all. I set out on this project only with curiosity. Why did Indian democracy survive when so many other post colonial democracies failed? And if that riddle can be solved, can the solution be exported? Holy shit. Why did Indian democracy survive when so many other post colonial democracies failed? And if that riddle can be solved, can the solution be exported? Now, the question is obviously very juicy and very fantastic. I wonder what the answers will be, the conclusions. Will he say it's because of Hinduism? Will he say it's because of the constitution? Will he say it's because of Ambedkar? That's where the real fun will be. The answers to these two questions may determine whether the world can hope to become a community of friendly democracies, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or is destined to remain a battleground between freedom and despotism. It may be that a world of opposing camps is the best we can hope for. But if a democratic future for the world is at all within reach, it's worth a little academic trespassing to help us get there. He's now trolling his detractors. He's saying, मैं तो trespass कर रहा था ना, अब लो trespass मैं करूंगा हो सके. Trespass ही करना पड़ेगा if we are to spread good ideas in the world to learn from India. It's worth a little academic trespassing to help us get there. This book is dedicated to AVC. I don't know who AVC is. Is it someone personal to him? Who might AVC be? Salvador Babonas, Sydney, Australia. That's where the preface ends. And I have not read any further from the preface. I skimmed through the book, but this is until where I have read properly. What a great book, guys. Have you all bought it as of yet? Please buy it as soon as possible. What a great book. What great Abhijit V. Chavda, AVC. What the fuck? But what great stuff. I'm getting New Scholar vibes. Max Weber was a person of his time. It's definitely something juicy. He can be a first in. Yes. We went from a physically colonized extractive colony to a mentally colonized extractive colony. And they don't want Indians or people interested in interacting with people outside the small cabal. Yes. You have affiliate link in your bio? No, I have not yet. Is it even available in India right now? I think it's supposed to release in December. Let me check. I got the Australian edition. Oh, it's available, but oh yeah, this is not the it's available for 2,000 rupees right now because it's the Australian edition available on Indian Amazon. There will be a separate Indian edition from an Indian publisher that will be priced much lesser, I've heard. Yeah, you should definitely buy it. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, yes. Neon is saying, is there even such a thing as Indian outside the national identity and passport? What unites us? That's too long a discussion for today. We'll end this live stream right now. Okay. Thanks for joining, guys. Do consider donating. Thank you, guys. See you soon.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর চালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে। যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে, তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো